Okay, thank you. We're here this evening, July 31, Planning Board meeting. It's our last one for the season break. And our first item is a staff update. This is in connection with the Chappaqua Crossing Preliminary Subdivision East Village Site Plan. So Sabrina, perhaps you can help us. You've put together a memo, and what we had last met on this particular project was to get input from staff in connection with progress and where we go next, because we have a September 5 meeting set up exclusively for this applicant. And what we're hoping is that we can make some progress on this and move this thing forward as expeditiously and efficiently as possible, but with the understanding that there is a good deal of work still to be done. So I know you've prepared a memo in connection with the seeker challenges. So if you can help us with that.
Sure. For the board's information, staff have been working with the applicant since we had a conversation regarding secret review on June 19th, and then we had a staff level meeting on June 26th, where we discussed the berm in the wall facing Cowden Lane, as well as the wall on the other side facing the office use on the site. We also discussed the approach regarding updating the number of school children, or updating the analyses to reflect an accurate number of school children. The applicant has provided information regarding those discussions in detail, which I think staff feels very comfortable with. But there's still other areas, as outlined to you, in relation to understanding the impacts of the project, where we are today as to what had been studied in the past and what we're looking at in regards to what is being proposed. I had, as I had indicated to you in my email, we have set dates this Friday and potentially next week for the applicant to flesh out the remainder of the outstanding issues with staff, with an expected deadline of August 10th at noon for resubmission of materials that would help us set the public hearing on September 5th. So it's really up to the board to determine if you're okay with that approach. What you would do tonight is you would set the public hearing for September 5th, and we would carry out that mission provided we receive information on the 10th to notice the public hearing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, I think it's appropriate to recognize that as much as we've looked at this in the past, this division, this section, the East Village, I think was really just looked at really conceptually. So now we're really getting into the weeds, drilling down, and for the first time looking at some of the information. And of course, with all of the other approvals that have gone forward, there may in fact be some repercussions in terms of what happens to the East Village in terms of even seeker there, because of some of the changes that we've seen during the course of development on the commercial side and the BRO side. Mm-hmm. So it's a moving target. I don't think it's overly complicated, frankly, but I think it's interrelated, and I don't think it's. I think it's important also to recognize that this is still a 91 unit application, which by our standards in our town, this is a very, very substantial application. I don't know if we've ever had one this big, but if we have, we certainly haven't had one since all the regulations have been updated in the 80s and more recently. So it is a big bite for us, and a big bite for the applicant, and a big bite, of course, with staff. So we've attached, or Sabrina has attached, this outline of seeker issues. And I think it's very good and very comprehensive. But if there are other issues that board members recognize now that we should identify, it would be helpful to have that now for staff as well as for the applicant. I know it just came this afternoon, and they're meeting on Friday, so if you have any additional thoughts, you can still send them to Sabrina the next day or two, if you haven't really had a chance to digest it and get through it. Again, this just came out this afternoon. I had one thought on page 2, and that was to make sure that we include rock chipping as well as blasting and rock crushing. Chipping perhaps is the most invasive of all the noises that we have with regard to construction, if it's necessary. and specifically on page 3 about the lighting, we always talk in terms of specifics in terms of the Kelvin temperature of the lighting. I know you allude to it in terms of type, the wattage, et cetera, but we've always talked in terms of the Kelvin. Really gives us a good idea what that lighting might look like.
When we talk about the proposed 9 additional bedrooms and the generation of school children, is there a place that's being factored in the additional bedrooms that are in the cupola building, so that we're looking overall, not necessarily for the applicant, but for the town, looking at the 20 or so extra bedrooms that we might have?
We can add language in here that reflects that.
It may not be the applicant's job to analyze those extra bedrooms in the cupola building, but we should certainly take that into consideration when we're looking at the East Village.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sheila. Anyone else, anything of this? Steve, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No,
This time?
we reviewed it, with Sabrina, so I think it covers the areas that we need to fill in.
The town engineer has not had an opportunity to review
Right.
it, so I'd like to leave it open for him
Of
to
course.
add things if necessary in
Sure.
the next couple of days.
Yep.
I guess under community character, one thing that I just stumbled upon as I was working on this, that the drawings, that many of the buildings have a walkway onto a street, and then there's another road in the back for the garage. But some buildings don't have a walkway onto the street. They have a walkway into, that, I guess, the underground water storage area where the west wall is. That's where their front door is, it's on that, and the driveway is in the back. And so it kind of strikes me as strange, because those homes, you can't really let somebody out in the front door, but near the front door, because in the rain, they're going to walk, probably 50 yards or 100 feet or something like that. So is that normal that we end up with that they have, some houses have a front door on a road and a garage on a driveway to get in there, and others don't? They have a front door
Yeah, it could be
middle
something.
of nowhere.
Yeah, it could be an issue. I mean, outside of secret, it could be obviously something that we'll look at. I know that there has been some question about some of the changes in the driveway pads and that they've really been shortened in some cases, and whether or not that really is something that is either fitting with the character or safe, in terms of cars backing out and coming in. But I think you're onto something, Dick, and I think it's something that, can be looked at and will be looked at. Les, did you have any comments or thoughts?
I'm in agreement with what Sabrina has proposed in terms of the board, if they're comfortable with the schedule authorizing the public hearing for the site plan on September 5th.
Right. Well, one of the other issues that we talked about at some length, and I've talked to the town engineer on this too, separately, is we have this material here. I think it would be very useful if we can set up a tight schedule with the applicant so that we can knock these things off, either with every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, whatever makes sense, with the applicant, with the staff. Because otherwise, it starts lingering and we start getting things thrown at us sort of out of order or ad hoc. So if we could do that, I think that would be a very efficient.
Yes, it would be.
It'd be very efficient. Oh, well. Be very efficient, and I think that would work well. And I think if we can get on that kind of a schedule, I think it would be very helpful to get us to the finish line, whatever that finish line might be, based on the information that we receive. And also, we're going to have to notify and renotice all the various involved agencies again, so we have to go through that whole cycle all over again.
We
So-
will address those issues, between now and the 5th.
Right?
And independent of what has been talking about before the planning board, remember the famous matrix we've been working with? Well, we're now proposing an expanded matrix to include all the steps that need to be taken, both by the planning board and the town board, and all the conditions that will have to be satisfied for those approvals to get us to the end of the process.
Good. Okay. Any other comments at this point? Does that sound fair to the applicant to set this up? And I think it'll be we can get it organized and really take it in bite-sized pieces and move this thing forward in a way that will accommodate you as well as accommodating staff and the planning board. Okay, terrific. Go ahead.
I'd also like to suggest that we've used this process before, and I think it would be good if we learned a little bit from that process. It wasn't, I think that it was set up very well. I'm just not sure that the response times and the response sequences were all that they could have been, and maybe we can improve on that this time around. I think it'd be good for everybody, the applicant and the town.
Yep. Good. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you very much. And just set it? Okay. Is there a motion to tentatively set the public hearing for September 5, subject to the conditions outlined in Sabrina's memo?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Sabrina.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Les.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you all in person at your next meeting.
You liar.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, we now go to our next item, and this is a public hearing. This is the public hearing on Taco Street Bar Kitchen. This is an application for a special use permit for a restaurant, 86 South Greeley Avenue. How are you?
Good evening.
Yep.
Okay, so this is an application for an interior renovation at a retail space at 86 South Street, South Greeley. It used to be a Dunkin' Donuts. Now we're gonna renovate it to make a little taco place. The Dunkin' Donuts used to have a carry-out permit, and now we're proposing more seating inside, and the areas that we have highlighted bring us above the 25% that will be allowed within the carry-out permit. So that's mainly why we're here. Sorry, I'm a little sick. Our sitting area comes to 29% of the total floor area. We have, including 6 workers, probably we will have about 48 people total at maximum capacity. We have also presented an elevation to the Architectural Review Board, and it was approved in the last meeting. And well, that's that.
Chairman, if you haven't already, you should do a motion to open the public hearing.
Did we do that?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to practice over August.
I don't know if you have any questions.
I had one question about the proposed overhead door. I know we talked about last time, and
Right.
Greg even had some comments with regard to design elements. But what does that overhead door look like when it's closed down at the end of the day or before you open?
Right.
My concern is that we don't have a sort of an overhead door like a Bronx look to it, like a Bronx look,
No.
like a security door.
Well, this is the proposed elevation, and this type of garage door, these are aluminum elements, and this is all glass.
So that's what comes down is closed, and
Right.
that's what we will see outside.
Right, you're gonna
Okay.
see glass, and then this is the garage door that will open completely, and then the main door is also panels of wood and glass. The whole proposed storefront will be aluminum, clear anodized, trying to, similar to what is there for the dry cleaner. When it's closed, you will see panes of clear glass framed by aluminum.
Okay.
I believe there's one similar in the old village of Pleasantville.
It's the Kraft
In Bedford.
pizza store.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah, that's right,
Same
craft
door.
beer place.
So
Not that I've been there.
today.
This evening.
I have so am I right that this would be the first one in town? Are there any others in the
There
village?
are no others in town.
And I'm assuming there are no others because no shopkeepers feel a need to have one.
Correct.
Because the crime incidence here for this kind of
But-
incident, I'm sorry, let me finish. Probably is not such that one would feel they would require it. Otherwise, we'd have.
Say that again?
The incidence of, I'm sorry, my microphone's out. The incidence of crime here in town, this kind of crime, is not such that,
No, we do not have crime like that.
so I guess I'm asking, why do you propose to have this kind of a door?
No, it's not. It's not for security.
Then what's-
This will open the whole store. This is the facade. So when
It's
it's
the
open,
facade.
we just
It's-
open the interior and exterior. So it's not.
an extra
it's not a
thing.
gate in front.
No, it's
I
not
thought
what
it
you're
was the
thinking.
security.
Unfortunately, I think I didn't.
So he can
No,
open up.
no,
for
it's my misunderstanding.
I
Don't
didn't
worry
have
about it.
photos, but it's actually a design item. It's
So-
glass.
So, in good weather, it would be an
It will
open
be open,
storefront.
right.
Nice.
It will be open and then, so it's kind of blending. We also added a note that
And maybe show him on the plan that there's a bar, or like a rail bar out there to sit, also to sit with high stools and things like that.
I saw that in the plan, but I didn't, it's not outside.
So the idea, depending on how it
Counter
works, is
service
that
there, right?
we will have the gate right there against the bar, and when it opens, the bar could be also will become
Got it.
kind of the green point to the outside. People could probably lean there, see,
Got it, okay.
right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. We had added a note here, it's not readable here, but what it says is what we have spoken, that people from this establishment could use the cafe, the sidewalk cafe permit that is on the corner for the pizza station. So just it's gonna become, the idea is that it will become kind of a restaurant corner.
Very nice.
Hey, when you mentioned at the last meeting, is that area reserved for pizza station, or is that just reserved for anybody?
It's reserved for having tables there, and then my understanding is the administration of it is as pizza station will want. A pizza station is the applicant for the sidewalk cafe.
So,
Being that is the same owner, they're gonna allow the people to sit there.
oh, the two restaurants are the same owner?
Yeah.
Okay, so, gotcha.
And we have required that a note be placed on the site plan as well as in the
It's in the resolution, right.
that states that folks from this establishment are able to use the sidewalk cafe on from the other establishment, and then if there's changes in ownerships or whatnot, the site plans will remain in effect.
Well, that's what I have.
And the sign's not illuminated, correct?
The sign is not illuminated. The sign,
So is it front illuminated?
well, the sign, we presented the facade to the architectural review board, which is what you just saw. And we have a basic sign there. The idea is, sorry, the sign will kind of match the bands that the other two spaces have, but the specific sign hasn't been finalized. So we have a note here that says, and you have to take my word for it because it's not readable, but a specific sign permit will be, a sign permit will be filed once the colors and the type of letter is defined.
And just refresh my memory, your neighbors, are they flat signs with
Yes.
just letters on it, or are they internally illuminated?
No.
And it's, okay. They're
This
just
is,
flat signs.
this is a very minimal craving out, and this is flat, just I think acrylic. We're thinking maybe having cut out metal letters, not, probably 2 inches sticking out from a board. So that's in the makings.
Okay.
We our last idea was with those letters maybe having a little band of tape light inside, not too bright, but
Like a halo.
yeah, like those. Now that we have those
The
LED.
architectural review board will review the sign.
Right.
detailing and the lighting, whether or not it's allowed and whether or not it's consistent with the code when they submit for the building permit.
Okay. Good. Any questions, comments, any further comments?
No?
Any questions from the public on this application? Not seeing any, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a draft resolution in front of us. I think we have a couple of changes that we might want to make to the resolution. Does anyone have any comments, questions on the resolution?
Just wanted to add on page 2, maybe line 45, if we maybe just put in between the word "the" and "sidewalk," the sidewalk, so they realize it's on the side of the building and not
Could say the south side.
on the south side, just so everyone clearly knows which area we're talking about.
Okay.
That was the only thing I had.
I think on line 27, I'm not sure, I don't think there's a stormwater pollution prevention plan for this application. So we don't have to enumerate that.
So that should be
Just delete it, right?
deleted?
Special
Yes.
use permit, right?
Yeah.
So do you want that to say south side sidewalk or just south sidewalk?
South sidewalk, I think would be fine.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, on line 42, while I suspect everybody on the board is familiar with that building, I don't believe we've inspected it. And so I don't think we have to either.
Mhm.
I personally have been in that building at least 2 or 3 dozen times over the last 4 or 5 years. So I think I have a sense of everything about it.
So we can strike "and has inspected." Would you say familiar with the property, with said property?
Well, I would say the planning board is very familiar with,
Okay.
put the word "very" in,
Mhm.
and then strike the said property, and strike has inspected it.
Mhm.
As long as the other board members feel they've been in it many times enough that they, many times, many times, so I think we have at
It's a good
least,
sign for you.
at least 3 many times here, so that makes it a special approach.
Good, okay. Any other changes? If not, as amended, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, we move now to our next public hearing, and this is the Appel Hammond Ridge Conservation Subdivision Lot Number 3, application for a site development plan amendment and stormwater pollution prevention plan approval for a swimming pool, 18 Hammond Ridge Road. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening, Glenn Tysers, landscape architect, representing Mr. Appel. Brad Schwartz is here tonight. He's been working with us on the declaration as requested in the Sabrina's notes and on the resolution. So hopefully we can move forward tonight. Any other questions for me?
No? Are there any changes at all since we last saw you, or, I don't believe? Maybe a
Well,
couple of
we've
things
made
with
change-
trees?
So Steve did give us a memo, as well as Sabrina. We've responded to Sabrina's notes, sent over changes today. Steve, I think we're okay with what we have going.
The change you sent over has to do with the apron along the side of the pool, or?
No, the changes dealt with the coverage calculations. Yep.
Changes in the site plan.
Mhm. And then Steve had some comments about some of the trees, replacement trees, beech trees.
The
being-
changes that I had requested and the changes Steve had requested had been incorporated into the resolution of approval as conditions. So they've submitted information today, but we will, when we receive the hard copies of that information, they'll go into satisfying conditions if you approve it tonight.
Right. I think everyone's comfortable with the conditions that
Correct.
we set forward, town engineer, Steve, yourself. Right,
Correct.
Right. Okay, Steve, your comments were?
Yeah, I mean, basically they're relocating 4 6-inch beech trees and they've placed them so that it maximizes screening, and they're also adding some hollies around the pool equipment. And that in combination with the existing forest buffer that's around the property, I think it does a good job of providing overall screening of the pool.
Right, right. Sabrina, I actually received extra copies that were Bob's.
Thank you.
There were also some comments as to the SWIP, the stormwater report.
Right.
Which has been done and handed in. E-poll tests were witnessed. We have not heard from Bob Cioli,
Yep.
but I know the information was submitted.
Right, and I think he's comfortable with conditioning it, yeah. Okay. We did have an issue, I think, and I think the resolution has been revised to indicate our thoughts with regard to any additional coverage or development on the lot. So basically, the planning board has come to the conclusion that this is it, this is what you have. And if something happens in the future, there's an application, that will be for a future board to entertain. So I know there was some issue about the one-to-one mitigation. We took care of that, and I think we've eliminated that. We just said, this is where you are. So that was a revision in the latest resolution that we just received this afternoon.
Okay.
And you've looked at it, right? You've
Yeah,
seen
we've
it?
looked at that.
Right, okay.
We've established a threshold, and
Yep.
anything beyond that's a problem. So.
Good, good.
Is there any steep slope disturbance at all?
No,
So there's not even a little bit of a slope that doesn't count?
no.
Okay.
We prepared a steep slope study. Bob reviewed it.
All right,
Bob
good.
has gone on record to say there's none.
And there's a statement we have in, maybe it's not in the new one, but let's see here, 444. Why, it's a question, Sabrina, why do we say the proposal would require no screening from off-site properties? No additional screening?
I think
Because there is
additional,
screening.
I think
No
additional.
additional.
Yeah,
No
I think
additional
additional is the right
screening.
way to do it there.
Am I changing something?
Yes, you're adding the word additional
Where?
to the, one of the
Line
characteristics.
45, page 4.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
A couple of questions.
Any comments from the public on this application?
Sheila has some.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is
Sheila.
there
No, yeah.
wording in the resolution?
Sure, sure.
If we're there. On page 1, line 60, where we talk about permission to allow additional increases of 110% and 115%. Is that additional increases to 110% and 115%?
Yes, I would say, I think that's correct.
Okay,
Can you
and then,
make sure you're speaking into
oh, sorry, I thought I was. Then on page 5, line 60, 10% allowance for additional coverage. And on page 6, line, is my mic not working? Because
green.
it's green and I think I'm talking into it. Am I talking into it?
Now you are, yes.
Okay. So should I go back to page 5, line 60, for additional building coverage? I think there's just a typo, and then the same typo on page 6, line number 1, 15% allowance for additional development coverage instead of or.
Right.
Okay.
Good catch.
And so, am I clear though, because I was working off my old copy, we have a revised copy in front of us, and on page 6, I think, Bob, you said something about any, we're done here, but any
Yep.
future requests have to come back to the planning board?
Yeah, I think on
But it-
page 6, for example, at the top there have been some revisions, and I think earlier, Jennifer and Steve made some changes. Page 4, lines 58 through 60 were amended, well, deleted.
Page 4, okay. So does this mean that they no longer have the right to come before the planning board?
Well, they have the right to come to the planning board, but that we're not mentioning anything about one-to-one mitigation. That will be a future
Or
application.
giving them, or as approved.
Right.
So if the intent is to allow them, either this homeowner or a future homeowner, to submit an application to increase the development coverage if, say, in 15 years, circumstances may warrant it, then there are some revisions that we should make to this resolution that's in front of you, because one of the second to the last, be it further resolved clauses, says that no further increase in building coverage or the second, the very last page, second to the last resolved clause,
Line 42.
which says that no further increase in building coverage or development coverage shall be permitted on the subject site in the future. So we should add to that without the approval of the town of Newcastle Planning Board. If the intent is that someone could seek that approval, you could grant or deny it, it's up to you, based on, you know, the history here.
They have the right to make, they would have the right to make the appeal in any event, but if this resolution was passed as it is, the future planning board wouldn't have the right to grant that. Is that right?
With this in place.
With this in place?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So you may want to, if that's your intent, to allow for that opportunity in the future, to say without the
Well,
approval of the
we
town
must really
council.
mean it because there's a redundancy here. It says, no further increase in the future. It's either further or in the future. It could be both if we really want to stick a pin in it, but
No increase then.
Yep.
no increase in the future.
As amended is basically shutting it down and saying there's
So
no-
is that what we want then?
That's the
That's the
question for you.
And Jim, let me ask
to
you a
resolve.
question. If they didn't say as approved by the planning board, would an applicant seek relief from the ZBA for something like this? Because the resolution prohibits it, or is it, it's done?
It's done. It's within this board's purview. Because it's, that right now, as I understand it, they are within the zoning
Correct.
Correct.
requirements, but it's the more stringent requirements that this board's impose
Because of the
because of
conservation.
conservation subdivision.
So
Um,
does it lessen the opinions of this board? Does it change the right for the applicant to come back at a future date to petition the board to do something that this resolution says can't be done?
I guess, so I guess that future applicant would have to ask for an amendment to this resolution.
They
To
have the right to
basically
petition.
lift that requirement.
Correct, they have a
They
right.
always have
that
the right to petition.
restriction.
The question is, does this board have, would the future board have the right to grant it? And you're saying by the amendment process to this resolution, they could seek that relief.
First, first the board, the future board would have to, in my mind, amend this condition to this resolution.
Right, based on appeal of the applicant.
Exactly.
Based on the application.
And then consider the substantive application.
Right.
As to whether or not
It's
to
an
increase.
additional step that would be required by a
Right.
future applicant to put additional development on the site.
Which we've done before. In fact, we just did recently with one of those Millwood applications where we revised the
Yep.
condition of coming back every 5 years. So it's something that,
But he had to demonstrate
Of
for
course,
a period
yes.
of time that, you know.
but it's, I don't know if it's as ironclad as we think it might be, that you're preventing a future planning board from revisiting an issue, and I'm not so sure that we should be doing
You
that,
shouldn't be
frankly.
doing it, but your intent of whether or not you want to allow future development or not, would, you know, you have to look at which statement would protect your interests today better than not.
Well, but what I'm understanding Jennifer to be saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that even if we did let this language stand, the applicant would still have the opportunity to come in and petition the board for an amendment to this resolution, and then once that's passed, to go ahead and petition to do whatever extra improvements.
I believe that is true.
Okay.
Of course, that's subject to 10, 15 years from now, someone having a like mind and
You're not gonna change your
interpreting
mind
this
in 10 or 15
resolution the
years,
same
are you?
way I am. What you may want to consider
She told me
is
she would
adding in
remember
here, shall be, no increase in building coverage or development coverage shall be permitted on the subject site in the future without an amendment to this resolution, or something to indicate that that is the avenue. by which it would.
I think
Interject
that
here for, I'm sorry.
legal opinion, please.
If I could weigh in, Mr. Chair.
Another legal opinion.
No, so Jennifer and I had discussed this issue over the past couple of days, and we would request that the language be included without further planning board approval, because not only would there need to be a new step of amending this resolution, but we're agreeing to record a declaration of perpetuity against the property. So that declaration would also need to be unwound with another amendment to that declaration. So we think the board is protected. I think your goal of making sure the world is on notice that any future homeowner is coming in understanding what the restrictions are and would have to come back before your board for any other approval. Our ask would be just don't tie the hands sort of
Yeah, of
forever.
course.
Make it clear that these are the restrictions, but who knows, improvements in stormwater technologies, any other needs arise 20, 25 years from now, or even longer, that the record is clear, that other boards understand they can consider future requests.
So I guess, and I understand that position, and it's a reasonable one. But, however, at the same time, it's just, I say just, I know it's difficult to go through this process, but it is just adding a step in the process, because it seems to me, because the future planning board has an interest in eventually granting the approval to, right? They would quite easily and quickly grant the amendment to the resolution as probably the same meeting, just in order to get to the point of hearing the application. So I don't think it's actually, to me, it's not an actual legal hurdle, procedural hurdle, really. But what I do think this language does, and I'm not certain we have to do this, but I do think what this language does is it sends a signal to a future planning board that that we hold these principles pretty tightly, because we do care about the neighborhoods, and we do care about all the things we care about, and we would like that kind of stewardship to continue into the future. So I'm not sure that we should amend this language to soften it in any way. It seems to me that there's a way out for a future property owner, a future applicant to appeal to a future board.
The only difference here is that second step of having the declaration that's already recorded against the property as well. So you're amending not just the approving resolution, then you would have to amend the declaration that was recorded.
You'll have to do that anyway, though, right?
So why do you want the relief here if you are putting restrictions on the property at the other end?
I guess that's the ask, is that if we could have the language, no further increases will be permitted without approval of the planning board. That way, that's in the recorded
But
declaration.
that would be true anyway. I mean, they have to come before the planning board anyway. So that language it really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't add anything to I think, it doesn't add anything to our message forward to the future stewards of the neighborhood. So that's implied in the process anyway.
It's just making it crystal clear then for a future planning board 25, 30 years from now to know that that was your board's intent. So there's no confusion. But we
I think that's what this language does, is it gives our intent.
Yeah, I think so too, clearly.
I agree that it would add further clarity.
Clarity
and
to what end?
clarity to the available process for the applicant in the future.
To include the language
To
that
include
was
the
stricken out?
language. And I'm wondering if there's some other way that we can make the board's intent, if there's
Well, that
another
resolution-
declaratory statement or something that we can put in there to give clarity to the process in the future, but also give clarity to the strong feelings of this board as far as the stewardship principles.
Well, we
that
can add
Mr.
language, it
Curley-
seems to me, in that section of the resolution that clearly states that whatever's being granted here is, in the opinion of this planning board, the maximum exposure, the maximum coverage and development that should be allowed. Maybe make that explicit. I think it's implied, but maybe we make that explicit.
That should be allowed.
No.
It should.
That is, had been.
That we are, not only that no further increase, but
No
the
further.
reason, but the reason that no further is that we have granted what we believe is the maximum coverage and development for this particular lot, and no further increase in building coverage or development coverage shall be permitted on the subject site. To make it very clear that
Got it.
we've reached this conclusion. We're doing it on the basis that we think we've gone as far as we can go on this particular lot.
Based on today's conditions.
Of course.
So in 20 years, if an applicant does come back and technologies have changed, even though they
Yeah.
understand our feelings of today, it does leave the door open for an applicant to possibly do something later on.
But Jennifer's looking for a signal to say that there is a process here in town for a future applicant. If they're just to read this and read the provisions in this other instrument, they'd say, well, I can't do anything, when in fact they can do something.
So I could see in the future, a future homeowner applying for a building permit, the future building inspector 20 years, 30 years from now, looking at this resolution after having received that building permit, seeing this language and saying, oh, no, building permit denied, you're not allowed to have any further.
That would be in our interest. What's wrong with that, honestly?
And then it would be up to the homeowner to.
Well, we
to
could enumerate
understand
the
that-
process.
First law is no excuse, I mean,
What we could do, Jennifer, is perhaps add in, instead of approval, without an amendment of this resolution and a change in the declaration, actually outline what the steps are. Does that help? Does that make it better?
I have some thoughts.
Sure.
I think this is an unusual property in a lot of respects because it is so large and it has been developed past what was originally intended. But in no way does that compromise the integrity of the conservation development. It still fits in beautifully. I am a little concerned about putting in such stringent language that would disadvantage this homeowner in a future sale, because unless this is the kind of language that gets recorded against other homes, either in a conservation subdivision or just generally, I'm just concerned this becomes a real red flag. And I certainly wouldn't want to take this beautiful property and the homeowners who have sort of come up with a very respectful plan to add this pool and increase the value of their property, enhance the value of their property, only to turn around later on and have buyers, potential buyers, look at this deed restriction and say, I don't know what this means. I'm a little concerned about getting involved with something like this.
well, that's a deed restriction, which is your instrument. We're talking about
Okay.
a
Well,
resolution.
I
We're talking about
I-
both.
Declaration, it's not.
Both of the
Okay, it's not a deed restriction?
I don't believe so.
Well,
Okay. I
it
don't
is. I
know.
mean, it's a declaration that would be, it wouldn't be in the deed, but it would be a declaration recorded against the property that would run in perpetuity.
Which you're
Come
gonna
up
do
with a
anyway.
title
Which would
search?
come
You're
up
going to
which would come up in a
It
search?
comes up in the title search. So that does affect the marketability of the title, which is why, at a minimum,
I'm sorry, I need to catch up here. Are you intending to do that anyway and asking for relief here?
No, we've imposed that on the applicant, that it should be a recorded instrument.
So
Got
so
it.
I
when
don't
I,
want to completely go all the way back. Yes, I mean, I haven't been involved in
No,
the
no.
process, but if we could undo the declaration, of course I would seek that, because that's an issue of marketability of title. But I also want to be respectful of the board and the process to date. So if the board would reconsider the declaration, of course, that would be our first ask this evening, because we don't always get that opportunity to explain to a future buyer, the future buyer's title company, and the future buyer's attorney, what happened here in 2018. So to not have that declaration recorded against the property certainly is protective and helps the current owner in potential sale.
So I take your point.
but I also am very cognizant of the fact that we really do feel that this property has been developed as far as it should. But on the other hand, what if the next owner has handicap accessibility issues and needs to put in some sort of ramp system to get in and out of the house?
And there have been other instances where this kind of language is put in resolutions that are not in corresponding declarations, where the planning board or zoning board sets forth, both here and in other municipalities I've had experience in, where the condition says no further approval, again, without town approval. So it preserves the flexibility for the homeowner and doesn't negatively affect the marketability of title with a recorded declaration in perpetuity. That's sort of the balance that I've seen done both in Newcastle and elsewhere.
So that situation where you said maybe somebody needs to like modify the home for that purpose, a handicap ramp and so on. There is a process which by amendment and by that could be done. I take your point about this potentially hamstringing the future value of the property. And that why would we penalize this property owner in particular as opposed to but this is the property owner applicant has come before us and asked for this much. The other property owners in the neighborhood haven't necessarily asked for this much.
The former owner here didn't. Yeah,
So if future applicants would come through and be asking for the same thing, it wouldn't be unfair to likewise put this kind of restriction on in their resolution.
Jennifer, the only phrase I can think of is to add at the end, except under extraordinary circumstances. But then that leaves the question as to what the hell does that mean? Oh, sorry, what the heck that means.
I mean, there already is some protective language in here about the board under no obligation to approve any further increases. It would be subject to your discretion, so.
That's kind of standard.
The-
That's
the-
always the
yeah,
case
typical
when
way.
you've exceeded
Yep.
stuff.
Is that boilerplate, or was that added into this
That was
resolution?
added into
I
this.
didn't think that was boilerplate.
Yeah, I mean, to Dick's point, I mean, that would leave it up to a future board to determine what it feels an extraordinary circumstance is based on the conditions existing at that.
See, I
point
just
in
think
time.
that language, I mean, it's, why do it? I mean, either we give them relief or we don't, and I'm not talking about giving relief.
Right, but rather than
But
creating
whether
new
we
standards.
change the language, right, and just let it fly. Or we hold to the language, either way, a future planning board, if an applicant wants to come in and make their case, they can come in and make their case. And the only difference is there would be an extra step in the process, this amendment process to amend this. That would be the only difference as far as I can see.
And the only concern for a future planning board is that they don't read this and then have to go back in the minutes and try to unwind and figure out what the board's intent was by including that language. So
I think that's why it would be
By adding the language, go ahead.
That's why
good
we
to have
want
that language in this section right here that clearly states that the planning board believes it has maximized its ability to grant coverage at this point.
Based on today.
Yeah, of
And we
course.
could always go back in the future.
Yeah, exactly, but, that will give, I think, a little bit of the thinking behind the statement, and then if you want to include the language at the end, I'm okay with it, as long as we make it very clear what our intent was, based on the record that we went as far as we could. We felt we went as far as we could, way back in the old days of 2018.
Yeah, I think it's important to get the language in, and beyond that, I think it's just become academic.
Yeah. So if, I'm not quite sure what that clause is or sentence might be, but does that make sense? That we include that in sort of the preface of that particular paragraph?
Particular paragraph we're talking about.
You have to say it again.
It would be page 8, lines 42 through 44. Of the revised.
This board believes that the property has been maxed out to its development potential.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Development and coverage.
And
But then we put back in
Yes.
the lines that say without approval of the Town of Newcastle Planning Board. Do we do that just on page 8, or I think there's a couple of other places where it's, where it appears and has been stricken from the text?
Page 4, line 58, and page 5.
Which one?
Page 5 is about the one-to-one mitigation coverage.
Yeah, that's deleted.
Okay.
So page 4, line, what did you say, 58,
there's another statement.
4,
Is it line 5? 45?
Well, the one-to-one issue is, that was kind of internally contradictory.
Right.
Because if you have a one-to-one mitigation, you're not gonna have an increase.
Right.
So
You have a change, though.
it would change, right, but not an
So
increase.
we're not, what my thought was, I don't want to hamper people in the future from having what they want outside in the way of development coverage, as long as they get rid of something they don't want.
Right, they can swap coverage for
swap.
coverage, as long as it doesn't result in a net
Yeah.
increase, right.
But we took that out now. So it's unclear.
But isn't
That's
that how
the
we
one-to-one
operate kind of
mitigation.
now? If somebody's at the max, they just have to pull something out? If somebody comes at the max, they pull something out, they do that now, so.
It'd be
is-
part of their application
Yeah.
process.
So
it's
we already
already in the
have, it's
numbers.
already
It's part of the
understood.
standard process.
Yeah, it's
I
already in the
understand it.
numbers, so.
And if we were to remain silent on this whole thing, and an applicant comes back in 10 years, when they go through the process, they're gonna see that they're maxed out, right? So they have to come back to a planning board, a planning
Anyway.
board's gonna see that they're maxed out, and they're gonna have to address it then.
Sort of the same,
Yeah.
Right.
the process that
But
they're going
that,
through right now.
that doesn't document something that if somebody wants to buy this property in 10 years, a title search doesn't red flag. So it's the same ending,
Yeah.
just a different way of getting there.
Same ending, just, yeah, different notice.
Different notice.
Different notice.
So nobody can come and just go to a building department and build here. They're gonna have to come to this board or another board or whatever.
That would be the law regardless.
Then under that sort of framework, we would ask again that the declaration not be recorded, so it doesn't
Right,
affect
because-
marketability, but
Yep, I hear
it's
you.
clear in the resolution.
The resolution is, the problem with it being in the resolution, they get lost, they get misunderstood. A declaration is clear.
Yep. And I think in this particular case, because we have gone as far as we have gone, the declaration is very appropriate.
Yes.
It's a special piece of property, but we've gone that far. I can tell you, just as a piece of information, that I knew the prior owner, and the prior owner was shocked that a pool was approved, because the owner said, "We maxed out coverage, how did you do that?" And so they were on notice, and that's the way it was conveyed. So that's just anecdotal, but I think it's important to, when you have this kind of a situation, it's very special, and one that we've gone considerably above the limit. I think a declaration is appropriate. Probably appropriate all the time, just so that we don't have these issues throughout town, but especially in this case.
And then I would submit, if there's going to be a recorded declaration, then we need the language about without future planning board approval, because we can't have that kind of confusion.
That's fair.
I think it's fair. So we can put the language back in, but I think we should also add language in there that makes it very well understood that we were maxed on this. And this board felt that it went as far as it could go.
So that
Now,
would
if a
be
future
page
board,
8.
yes, 42 through 44, I think somewhere inserting that
And
language in there.
then I think the language on page 6, maybe line 8 and 9, we need to address that too, because that's the
Right.
same language as on page 8.
Right.
So we just need to be consistent then
Right.
in how we're addressing it.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I mentioned a couple of times, I would just like that language along the lines, Jennifer, of, based on today's condition. I just think it's important to make it clear that it's, your board felt it was maxed out based upon today's conditions, today's stormwater technologies and stuff like that, so that way in the future, as things change, obviously that request in the future is based on then current conditions. So it's just a tweak on the language, and that would be acceptable to the board.
Say again, what did you went through a whole bunch of, you had three.
Just that the language about, if your board's saying that you maximized based upon
Existing regulations.
Existing regulations, existing conditions. That way, and then the future homeowner can always seek additional based on, subject to board approval.
Actually, I don't think it's really accurate, because it's really based on our approval as a conservation development. So whether I think that's really the crux of it. It's not necessarily the techniques or the state of the art in terms of how these things are done. It's really this board and this town's concept of what a conservation development is. And we granted a lot of leeway based on the size of the lot, based on the layout of the lot and all the conditions that we set forth in here. I'm not quite sure that we should try to tie it to technology or the state of the art. It's really the conservation development. Now, if that changes, fine, but I think that's implied.
And also, that's language based on today's conditions. Okay, now we got to list all the conditions that apply to this particular, it's language to me which is just wide open for
And things could get
misinterpretation.
more restrictive in the future. You never know.
Actually, you'd hope that the technology would make it better rather
Better.
than more invasive, so.
Again, the language is in there, subject to future planning board approval.
You're okay with that?
We're good.
And we'll put that preface in that one paragraph then.
In
And make those
one or
other
two?
changes. Well, I think you're correct.
Somebody's kept track of all that, right?
Janice has-
Hopefully, it's not going to be in verbatim, because that'll be just unbelievable.
Janice is the only one not talking.
Can it be, have Bob okay it? Is that-
That's fine by me.
That's okay with me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Janice, I didn't hear what you said. What did you just say?
I'm gonna make the changes and then have Bob, if it's all right with the rest of you, have Bob okay it, final version.
Good, thanks.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments? Is there a motion to close the public hearing on this matter?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
As amended, is there a motion to approve the resolution? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate your board's discussion tonight.
Okay, we move now to our next item. This is an informal hearing for a pending application. This is Bagnaki Alert. This is an application for a site development plan for an accessory apartment, wetlands permit, stormwater pollution prevention plan approval, 60 Inningwood Road.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Barrett. I'm the landscape architect and site planner for the project. I'm here with Merrick Nagy and his wife Joanna Eller, and their attorney David Antwerk, and Alan Pilch is our civil engineer for the project. So we're back before the board, and we're looking for some direction. We've provided some options, and I thought I'd just quickly start and just kind of just summarize where this project was. We started with this board in April of 17. Prior to that, it had been through a review process with the ERB. The project is really two components. We have the back component here, which we have a mitigation plan that we developed for that. And then we have the cottage, which is really, most of our discussion has been on the cottage because everyone seemed comfortable with, there was some unauthorized clearing, there was a mitigation plan developed to restore the water course, add some boulders, put some trails in, remove invasives, plant with natives, everybody seemed comfortable with that. Where the focus has been with the cottage. So I'd like to go to an alternatives plan just so we can quickly go through what everyone has seen and discussed before and how we got to where we are. So that would be 3, Al. So when we were before the board in April of 17, this was the plan that we had. Existing cottage was shown here. There was a ZBA-approved cottage right in this area. And what we had shown was we've shown a long walkway with a cottage. This was very preliminary. We came back and talked to the board, and then the concept of a driveway was said, well, is there going to be a driveway to serve as this? So we came in and we showed this plan with the driveway, and at that point said, well, that's an awful lot of coverage. Does that driveway have to be that big? So we went back and then we scaled that down. And at that point, what we did, we also added some features that were recommended by the environmental coordinator in the ERB. For instance, there's going to be stone walls to separate the cottage from the buffer. And what we thought was significant, and we've been saying all along, this is a ridge right here. The wetland is down on this side of the ridge, on the east side of the ridge. Top of the ridge is here, and the cottage is down on the west side of the ridge. So all the drainage runs down to a rain garden before it gets released into the rain garden. We also discussed possibly bringing a driveway in over the existing cottage. That didn't seem to be such a good idea. And it seemed that one of the things that everyone was looking for was to maintain this 80 feet from the back of the cottage to the wetland. That seemed to be the number people were comfortable with. We had plans that showed it closer. But what happened was by moving the cottage further to the north, we were able, so this is the location of the existing cottage. This was the ZBA location. Then it got moved to the north. We were able to maintain the 80 feet to the wetland, maintain the 40 or 42 feet to the street. And so it seemed to be this was the location that seemed to make sense. We showed two options. We showed one with the walk, and we showed one with a driveway. So let's go, so fast forward then, there was a meeting back in March, and discussions led to size of the cottage, work in the wetland buffer. And so the applicant went back and we all talked together and said, what could we possibly do to make this a better plan? And we came up with the idea of let's get the septic out of the wetland buffer. The septic is very old, probably undersized, although his septic company has tested it and said it's serviceable. How long is it going to be serviceable for? And I think that was a concern that everyone had. Alan was engaged to design a new septic. That is in the works with the health department. Sheet 2 is going to open now. So what we have then, we're in the location north of the existing cottage that maintains the 80 feet to the wetland. So that seemed to be a logical place where everybody was comfortable. At this point, back in, we filed with the board and we provided what we call option A and option B, requesting from the board some direction on what might be the preferable approach. And the difference in the options is essentially that this cottage would be a 997 square foot footprint, maximum is 1,000. And it would be accessed by the existing parking space over a stabilized grass path. So the stabilized grass path these are used for overflow parking areas, and it's basically a poly mesh that gets rolled out over the grass. You take the topsoil out, you mix it with a little stone dust to firm it up, and you put this on it, and it really stiffens it up. So you'd have a hard working, not hard, but it wouldn't be subject to mushiness when it rains. So that was option A. Option B was going to be a smaller footprint, 833 square feet. In both cases, the applicants have worked with their architect to remove one of the lofts in the original building and to remove the screened porch to bring these things down bring them down a bit. And then what we came up with for a driveway would be a driveway which would be grasscrete with, it would be 4 foot travel ways with 4 feet of grass in the middle. We're trying to reduce the footprint in the buffer. We talked about gravel before. This seemed to be the most minimalistic. Both of these plans, this septic that's over here now would be, that right there would be abandoned, and Alan would create 2 new septics outside. Here's the 100-foot buffer. So they would be located outside the 100-foot buffer. They would pump to them. So it seemed it was, it's a great improvement over keeping the septic in the buffer. In July, the applicant appeared before the ERB to discuss this. We wanted to get before the ERB so the ERB could provide any comments they may have to the board for this meeting. And their discussions said, well, what about option C? So option C was, let's go to option C. Option C is a combination of options A and B, where the ERB felt it's practical. Option C is up on the top hill. That's it. So option C is a combination of the two. It's the larger footprint. It's still 80 feet to the wetlands. It's still 42 feet to the street. The ERB, the ZBA approved 40 feet. And it has the grasscrete driveway. You can see the smaller footprint of option B is right here. So this is what they consider was probably the best of both plans. Remember, we are putting this stone wall in to separate the cottage from the buffer. Remember, we're doing a lot of wetland mitigation, removal of invasives, replanting. It's quite an extensive planting, both in the back and in the front. By removing this septic here, this gives Alan another opportunity to get any runoff to treat it that he couldn't get into the rain garden, although he feels that he's in good shape with that. I'm going to let him talk about that. Again,
Where's the septic on this?
way up here.
The septic, yeah, let me just speak to it. The septic area is, I can't see it specifically on here.
Ceiling is.
It is, It is north of the gravel, driveway.
Right.
That goes to the, which goes to the main house.
Right.
And it's actually, there's, the water main comes off of, it actually serves the main house, comes off of Vales Lane and sort of loops towards the house. And actually, the entire septic system, both the primary and 100% expansion area is located to the west, if you will, in that little triangle of land formed by the gravel driveway, Vales Lane, and the water main.
It's actually a pretty big triangle.
It is a big triangle, but it, correct, there is. But that's where it's going to be located. What we also have done, just so you know,
Do we have
is
perk tests on that yet? Do we know
we
what
have
perk
done
looks
perk
like?
tests, our own perk tests. We actually did a deep hole test. We went down 7 feet. There was no groundwater, no bedrock, no seeps. And we also run percolation tests, and I'll say generally between 16 and 20 minutes per inch. But this Thursday, we're actually having the health department is actually witnessing the deep hole tests, and probably the following week we'll end up doing the percolation tests, so we'll be done with the testing. But we've actually wanted to make sure that we came here, that we knew we had something that's feasible.
Right.
And it absolutely appears to be. I mean, because there's no restrictive layer, there's no reduximorphic features or bedrock or groundwater.
So it works.
Looks like, it not only just works, there's no fill that's required.
So what's the difference? There's no difference in the septic relocation proposal between B and C?
B or C, same thing.
So why did the Environmental Review Board prefer C over B?
They just felt that the grass-screened system, for the driveway, I mean, they felt that a driveway made sense because of practicality of someone living there and they're coming in.
I thought that was a feature of B as well.
Well, there's two different approaches to it. They just liked to want an option B better, with using a strip of grass and concrete.
And you guys prefer, I'm sorry, that board prefers B over C or C over B?
They like the combination of A with going with the larger footprint.
That's my question.
With B with the driveway.
Why do you prefer a larger
They
footprint?
didn't feel that it was a significant enough difference between, the two options that it couldn't be effectively mitigated.
So why would you prefer one? If it makes no difference, why would you prefer one over the other?
They just felt that the code allowed 1,000, so they were comfortable with, allowing it.
So
because
did they
were both
prefer it or they're
underneath.
just comfortable with it?
Well, I think that if we look at this from the applicant's point of view, if he's going to be building a cottage and the cost of construction and the cost of everything he's done to get here, he would like to be able to have the larger cottage if he can. We're talking about 833 square feet of a footprint versus 997. So we're talking about maybe 100 square feet. And then, of course, the driveway does add a footprint. I think that what we've been trying to convey, and I think that the ERB maybe agreed with us, is that given the measures the Bignakis have taken to get that septic out of there, which is the biggest potential impact that could happen to that wetland. If that fails, it's going to go right in there. To take it out of there and just take that right off the table, on top of its extensive mitigation, and when you consider it's a 13-acre property with 1,600 feet of road frontage, there's going to be a wall here. We have a ridge between the wetland and the cottage, so that incremental additional footprint in the buffer from the extra 100 feet of building and the grasscrete strips felt that it should compensate. We feel that's good mitigation. On top of the planting, but to get that septic out of there, I personally think that's huge.
Will that be a pump system, Alan?
Yes,
Or
it will.
It will be.
Yeah, because of the topography,
Great.
it goes down and up slightly. That is correct. So it will be a pump system. But it's not a lot of head, certainly.
Right.
And it's a low flows. I mean, it's a one-bedroom building.
Right. Well, to Tom's point, it's roughly a 20% increase over the footprint, so. One of the things we always try to do is avoidance, and we mitigate afterwards, so. But
I'd just say, again, I still think moving the septic system out of the entirely
no
outside,
question.
a fully code compliant one,
Yep.
is a significant amount of mitigation. in the first
Absolutely.
place.
And the environmental board had the same opinion. They really felt moving, the septic outside of the buffer was a tremendous benefit, to the wetland. And then also the fact that they're doing a 10-year monitoring and maintenance plan, they agreed to do that as well. And, you know, the amount of mitigation they're doing, they're taking a site that's almost 100% invasives and removing and replanting over time. So they felt that the functionality of the wetland buffer, you know, to a large, you know, wetland system was going to be improved in the future. And because there'd be permanent, you know, fencing during that 10-year period, and, you know, there'd be an opportunity to really restore and enhance and show what a good wetland restoration project could accomplish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for the record, I guess, you know, the existing septic system doesn't have a backup system designed. It's meant, you don't know for sure whether one could be fit in there, but if you're ready, by putting it in the other place, you'll have a primary and a secondary system, which will then give decades and decades of good service. So I think that truly is a plus. And I can understand the other mitigating circumstances, you know, with the ridge line and the drainage which goes away from the wetland, which kind of means, in a way, the wetland buffer should be changed because the water that goes the other way does not impact the water course, at least directly, maybe very indirectly someplace else. So I think those are all pluses. I am a little curious, wasn't one of the original sizes of the cottage 525 square feet?
It was always about 900, 900.
Is that the existing number?
Existing one, maybe.
Yeah, the existing was like
Existing was 485 square feet.
485.
485, right?
That's the existing.
And there's no special ask for the 997, correct?
No, that's code.
Yeah, it's all
It's code
permitted.
compliant, yeah.
So it's 160 feet, that's what the question, which was a screened-in porch, I believe?
I think screen and porch was not included, the screen porch was not included in the footprint of the garage. But we took it off from the-
Oh, so it was 997 plus the screened-in porch? And the screen, okay, got it.
I
And
think
it was
we.
13 acres is the entire property?
I think we've noted all the so-called mitigation here, but playing devil's advocate, I think the septic as originally set forth was really an obstacle for this board. And it's not really something that I consider to be mitigation, it's something that's so essential just to move this thing forward that if, you know, it was going to be a problem. But I certainly understand the benefit of it. It is a substantial improvement. And I think I agree with Tom. I'm not quite sure I understand the thinking of ERB, but at the same token, I don't think the 100 feet is going to be I don't think it's a showstopper. So I think I'm comfortable with moving forward, given all the other circumstances and mitigation here.
I mean, I'm not quite sure exactly where to come out on this, but I think that, I think it's important to look at this project and say, if this application had come to us whole cloth with everything that's being proposed right now, before the clearing had been done in the wetland and wetland buffer, and we knew what the condition of the wetland buffer was. We had a survey done by the town, ratified by the town, under the oversight of the town. The clearing that has been done was done based on our recommendations, our regulations, so to speak. I wonder how we'd see this application now. I mean, I wonder if we would say, yeah, go ahead and do all the clearing and go ahead and build this building in this wetland buffer. I'm not sure the aggregate of all of those impacts, even though there are benefits, but we actually don't know what the impacts were to the wetland buffer clearing. We have no record of what was done. So to claim that it's a benefit to the town, I'm not sure that there isn't a debit buried in there somewhere that we just didn't have the opportunity to do what we're supposed to do, which is be responsible for that.
I would just like to add that the unauthorized clearing that did take place, it did dovetail with what the ERB had approved before they realized it needed to come to the planning board. That was part of the mitigation.
Was there a plan?
Oh, yeah.
It was done according to plan.
Yeah, it was done to the plan, and that was the disconnect, that, you know, it should have waited until the permit was issued, and it was done before. But what was done was prescribed and was approved by the ERB, so.
Steve, does that square with your?
And what the board did in the memo to the planning board was, you know, they held off because it followed the general guidelines to leave it at your discretion on whether you wanted to proceed with violations or have it be part of,
But
you know, this program.
fair enough procedurally, but did, on your review of the work that was done, did it meet your specifications?
Yes, yeah, I mean, essentially what they did is just removed the invasives and the debris that was accumulated, you know, in the wetland buffer area.
Okay, very good.
I think further to that, one of the concerns I have would be that, you know, we've seen this in other applications, is that certainly since they've done it consistent with ERB recommendations, there are actually benefits with all these various plantings that we're going to see, et cetera. One of the concerns I have is maintaining those in the future and giving the applicant the ability, subject to, you know, our jurisdiction and subject to the regulations and the plan that Steve works with the applicant. My concern is that we give the applicant the ability to go out there and maintain the wetland in this vibrant fashion, rather than have it overgrown with barberry, invasives, and all those other kinds of vines, et cetera. So I didn't see that here, so I think that should be something that we should make sure that we do, consistent with the applicant's wherewithal.
One of the items we have in the monitoring and maintenance, you know, protocols is that there has to be 85%, you know, success of the plantings that are done. It permits up to 15% invasive, so I mean, that's what's closely monitored as part of the annual, you know, monitoring that they do for a 10-year period.
10-year period?
So there's built-in, you know, that if they find that they're exceeding or doing anything, then there has to be, you know, maintenance and management
clearing.
done, you know, during that course of
Right.
event, so that it, you know, meets those criteria.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, so we have some good protections in, you know, that monitoring plan. It's still
Okay.
subject to enforcement and, you know, getting after them, but you know, at least I think it's some good safeguards in there.
Well, in that case, it seems to me that, as far as I'm concerned, it would be the applicant's choice whether it's B or C. I suspect it's going to be the larger building footprint, which
C is their
13
preferred.
acres, it's like 100 square feet is like nothing. And it's, from my point of view, it's a handsome-looking building. I think it'll be an asset
Yeah.
to the neighborhood.
The only facetious question I have is, it's not made out of gingerbread, right? Looks like it could be.
Do you want it?
That's a building code issue.
Good
Sabrina,
point.
you had some issues and points you want to just raise?
Just shows,
Basically, I think the applicant just needed the planning board to support a plan so that the applicant can detail out that
Right.
plan and provide the missing information and
Right.
and address the comments that staff have issued.
Right.
So
Well,
it's a matter of saying, let's move with Plan
C.
C. And I also think that if the board is so inclined, given our time off and then our restrictive meeting schedule in September, that perhaps the board would want to schedule a public hearing for this in October, provided the applicant is responsible to the outstanding staff comments prior to then, and enough time for us to notice that public hearing.
Yeah, we have an October 16 meeting, so the deadline date for that would be September 24. So if we're comfortable with that suggestion, obviously you've got the town engineer's memo with all the requirements that he has set forth. You have Steve's comments, you have Sabrina's comments. I guess you heard from us more than you want to hear.
I just have a question about the curb cut. I think I see from Sabrina's memo that the building department determined that the new curb cut will need a variance.
Right.
So I think the question is, at what point should the applicant go to the zoning board? Would you like them, your resolution to be subject to the variance, or perhaps during this bit of a hiatus with the planning board's meetings, the applicant can pursue
Well, I think since we've given guidance on Plan C, they can also feel free to apply with the ZBA and move that forward. They're going to have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And whichever one comes
That makes
first, we can
sense.
condition accordingly.
Yeah, because we did note in the town planner's memo some of the criteria, and it just, we can get to the driveway code card. Just to clarify these issues so everyone understands what they are. So one of the code issues, one of the issues would be that for the third curb cut, it talks about if there is a loop driveway, which we have here, that the inside edge of that driveway would, in order to be compliant, must be within the inside of the 75-foot front yard setback. So had this driveway, let's say, was here, it would not be compliant, but because the driveway falls within, outside of the front yard setback, I think that it complies, correct?
Yeah, we would take the plan and, when you submit to the zoning board, the building inspector, the zoning code enforcement officer will review to ensure that you're compliant.
Okay, good.
And he'll confirm the variance that you're requesting as well.
All right, good. And we feel that with the 13-acre property, we've previously submitted a plan that, we could do the phantom subdivision. It could work easily because there's so much land, even taking out the wetlands
Even
areas.
taking out the wetlands. Even taking out the wetlands and the buffers and so on.
Yeah, it's that large. So that works, so, we're happy to go forward with that and start that process too.
Will this require an amendment to your current variance as well, because of the setback from Bales Lane? Okay,
We're asking for less, so I can't say
Right.
it'd be a problem.
should be.
Well, and they could, if the board would like to give a recommendation, a positive recommendation to the ZBA, so the applicant can go with that, saying the location of the building is satisfactory to you, that you understand the applicant's perspective on needing a third curb cut to the street, that would help them and help the zoning board understand that they're before you for this already,
Sure.
and give them grounds to, move forward on their actions.
I think that'd be appropriate.
And how do we do that?
So you can request staff to prepare a memo with a positive recommendation to the zoning board of appeals to be signed by the chairman outside of a regular meeting, with aim towards getting that accomplished so they can meet the September zoning board of appeals deadlines.
Well, that should be easy.
Okay, is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll see you in October.
Thank you
So Plan C.
By the way, once again, excellent presentations, great drawings, really good job. Made it very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
I'd like to make a statement if permitted.
Sure, come on up.
My name is Hensel, Richard Hensel. I'm a resident at 47 Vales Lane, across the street from this structure that's under discussion tonight. The building is unsafe, extremely hazardous. Each day it remains standing. It's in violation of Village Code, Town Code 46, as titled Unsafe Buildings. And because of its advanced deterioration and lack of upkeep and maintenance, it is also uninhabitable. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here not as an attorney, not as an architect, not as in any of the above titles. I'm here as a private citizen who has to look at this monstrosity day after day, year after year. It's located directly across the street from, as I mentioned, from my property. It's unsightly, a blight on the street, and a real optical liability when I go to sell my home. 3 years ago, former building inspector Moskiel conceded the structure had to be condemned, and he would take the appropriate action. Nothing's happened. 3 years ago. Subsequent discussion with Richard Polcari, Moskiel's successor, resulted in his commitment to investigate the matter and get back to me. He never did. 2 or 3 years ago, at a zoning board meeting, the board conceded the building was an eyesore, in town building code violation, and should be raised. It's still standing. A letter to the town supervisor dated May 10th of this year summarized my complaints, including pictures. That remains unanswered. How can this structure remain standing when all parties including the owner, believe it should be raised. I'm told he wants to relocate it. That's absurd. Pure hogwash. The wooden walls are rotted, warped, termite-ridden. The roof has been penetrated by fallen trees. The structure is in complete and total disrepair. I asked the town to let the owner, in compliance with town zoning board rules and regulations, build a replacement structure anywhere on his 12, 13 acres that he wants to. It's not a matter of my concern. It's his property, he can do what he wants, but as long as he's in compliance, he can put it anywhere he wants to. But concurrently, I also asked the town to instruct the owner to raise the structure without further delay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Has it been taken up by the building department recently? I mean, or do we have an application for demolition? Have you filed one?
I think our concern would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have to leave that building in place until we get a permit to build a new one? Or wouldn't, otherwise, would that be true? I don't know. I don't know.
It is true? Why?
Because it would lose its non-conformance status.
But they're going for a variance.
It's
Well, they
pre-existing,
have a variance, but you still need a
non-conforming.
building permit.
So
Because it's non-conforming.
is there a way that the town or we could not approach, but send a message to the ZBA?
We can raise it, I mean, make it down this month, if necessary. It's not an issue.
No, but if you can, but apparently you can't, so I'm looking for a way for us to get the
jeopardize
approval,
any-
right, to get the approval from the ZBA.
It's not a ZBA
It's a
approval.
building department issue.
It's a building
It's
department
building
issue.
No, but but
It
I'm
has
sorry.
nothing to do with the zoning board.
I thought you said that,
Well,
let
it's
me
considered
finish.
a non-conforming structure.
I thought you said that it was is grandfathered in order to retain that, you needed to keep that right, you needed to keep the building and put a new one in first. Now, that's not a zoning?
That
That's,
has nothing to do with the zoning board.
Okay.
That's
So
a building department determination.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of whether the building department determines that it's an unsafe structure under the code that should be taken down regardless of its zoning implications. So I think it's something that the building inspector has
We
to
would have to look
review.
into it. I think
I
it
don't know
would
that
just.
we can make any determinations other than indicating to the building department that you would be in favor of it coming down if that's possible under the code.
Okay, I'm sorry, because I'm not, I don't think I'm getting an answer that I understand, so forgive me.
Okay, sure.
I thought that there was an issue of, once it comes down, the building department says it can come down, but then the building department would say, wait a minute, you can't put another building here because you have lost the right to do that because you took the old one down. I'm not talking about the condemnation and demolition, I'm talking about the replacement. So does the building department make that determination?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm confused about with respect to that is the applicant is not seeking to put a building up in kind in the same location.
Exactly. They're not going to use the
So I don't
foundation
know that that's
or.
necessarily something that would
So-
bar them from
Might I
taking the
su-
building
might I
down currently,
suggest
but I think
something
it's
here?
something that needs to be discussed with the building inspector.
That's
not our
I think it needs to be
determination
cleared up
make.
before they
Yeah.
take it down.
Oh,
because-
for sure,
yes.
yes.
That's all
So
I'm
I think
asking.
if there's a desire to take the structure down, once this board sends a positive recommendation for consideration of the zoning board, it may be worth the applicant having a conversation with the building inspector, identifying what you want to do, the existing building, where it's located, its setbacks, and let the building inspector make the determination that you can demolish the existing structure without impinging your future rights to put your new structure up.
Go ahead, come
I
in and
don't-
talk to them tomorrow.
But why would that be something that the building inspector has jurisdiction
That's what I
over?
understand. I thought
I don't
it was a
get
zoning
that.
thing.
Because
What?
right now, the
It's a
structure
It's a
that
zoning thing.
exists is a pre-existing non-conforming structure.
Right.
And there are regulations regarding the removal of a non-conforming structure and versus the continuance of a non-conforming structure. An assessment would need to be made if they are reaping any benefits from that existing non-conforming structure that would be lost if that particular structure was
was removed at this particular time without having an approved site plan for a future structure.
And the building inspector is the official within the town charged with making that determination, because it's a zoning code interpretation. And the
I
building
don't get it
inspector has
because
that authority.
we have an applicant filing an application, which
But
is
you
going to
have-
come through.
Say they take down 3 walls in the roof and leave 1 wall up.
Just leave the foundation.
Well,
And that
down
is, that
the
is a
floor.
discussion for the applicant to have with the building
Yeah, that's
inspector.
not.
Yeah, so let's move on.
We're happy to
We'll
follow
figure it
up
out.
with the building.
Good.
and-
Yeah,
and-
to make sure you,
But I, for one, agree that it ought to come down as soon as possible.
Without you
looking at-
losing your
well,
rights to go
I
forward.
live around
but
the
without
corner,
the
and I've been
proper
looking at it for years.
legalities and the paperwork in place, do not go farther than,
Well, I wasn't recommending that.
I just, yeah, but you weren't saying that, too.
I wasn't saying that either. You're
The,
right.
the only other suggestion I might have for your neighbor across the street is, I don't know if you could put up a temporary fence that is somewhat attractive, and so he doesn't have to look at it. It probably, it's about 30 feet of fencing, and maybe that solves the problem temporarily, and that fencing can be used elsewhere on your property later. And if he doesn't want it, then you don't have to do it.
That's not what he
We
wants.
have the invasive species growing, separating us, so.
Ah.
I think taking it down would be benefit everyone, so we'll follow up with the building
Yeah,
inspector
go for
and
it.
and see what we can do.
But there are arcane rules, on having a non-conforming building and then in any shape, form, or manner, having another non-conforming building. And if there's a gap, I can understand why there's a problem.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
very good, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we go now to our next matter. This is an informal hearing for a new application. This is the Millwood Veterinary Hospital, PC, application for a site development plan amendment approval, 231 Sawmill River Road in Millwood. Question about
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Michael Picarello, MEP Architects, representing Dr. Jeremy Tubbs, who actually is here with us this evening. The applicant has hired us to look to put on a single-story addition to the rear of their existing single-story veterinary hospital. The hospital lies right next door to Rocky's Deli and the hardware store. The current building is code compliant for zoning, and the existing macadam drive, or the parking area, is currently unstriped. So one of the first things that we looked at doing the addition, is positioning the addition to the rear of the building, making sure that we avoid steep slopes, and there certainly are no wetlands issue back there. Dr. Tubbs is looking to expand the space in his for its practice, primarily for storage use. We are adding an exam room, so we don't, he's not looking to expand his business per se, basically to expand the room for his business to use. So a vast majority of the addition is a storage space in the back. The extra room is staying in the same location.
The storage is really for, looks like dog runs, right?
Crates, basically.
Also, dogs won't be in the crates, they're just storing the crates back there?
No, they will be in the crate.
So the addition is more space for dogs to be in crates, and
Correct.
is the dog run where they leash a dog and he runs on a,
No, the dog runs are basically larger, larger sort of.
Oh, for bigger
crated
dogs.
area, bigger dogs.
Oh, okay.
Those runs are very similar to what they have today. Simply moving them back further. The one room that is expanding is the treatment room, to give them more, again, to give them more room to work. And we have received comments from the planning department. There's a few things that we'll certainly add for our next submission, like the hours. The one comment on there, actually, after speaking to Dr. Tubbs, was to locate the dumpster, which is currently located in the northern corner of the building, The carting service wanted to have access to that carting dumpster, which is only a 3-yard dumpster, from the Kirby's parking lot area. So we're planning on moving that location from where I'm showing it, which is the southern corner, back to the northern corner. It'll be a small 3-yard dumpster. It's serviced twice a week. So we can clarify that in our next submission. So the biggest issue we have is that we're going to be required to have a parking space variance. I believe the memo came back looking for 3 spaces. We were hoping to be able to stack some parking for employees. Apparently, that's not going to be allowed. So we're looking for a variance for those 3 spaces. We didn't have the intention of expanding the parking lot. There's actually current buffer and shrubs on either side of the parking lot, so we're hoping to keep those. Currently, there are no parking issues at the facility. Dr. Tubbs, every time I've been there, and certainly Dr. Tubbs has verified that there has never been a parking issue. So I don't think that even though by regulation we'll be short 3 spaces, I don't think it's going to be detrimental to his practice. And like I said before, he's not looking to expand his practice, just basically create more space for his practice.
Okay, good. Sabrina, I think you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. As far as the parking, I mean, this board does not want to see you create more impervious surface than is necessary.
Right.
And so the question, you've been there, the doctor has been there, we just the board needs a little more understanding of how you operate. Typically, how many patients do you have at one time? Are all of your employees there at the same time? How the business circulates in relation to its parking needs.
Sure.
Granted, the expansion is not to increase business, but it does give you more space. How many appointments do you see during a day? Just to give this board a sense of realistically with 4 employees, are you utilizing 10 parking spaces versus 25 parking spaces? I think that documentation of use, hours of operation, how employees, the hours that they're there, the hours that you're open for customers to come in, clients to come in and out with animals, to get a better sense of how the site is utilized from a parking standpoint. And that way it will give them an idea as to whether or not they can give you a reduction in the parking requirement and potentially bring in more green space or something of that nature. And how much, is 3 space, 5 spaces, you show a handicap space, can we separate that a little bit and require 15 or 18 parking spaces or even 20 parking spaces plus 1 handicap space? You need to give them a basis for understanding how the site functions.
Sure. Would you like Dr. Tubbs to speak to it now, or you want to prepare?
No, you need to prepare something and submit it and really show that it will work.
And also, I was curious, besides the parking, what are our septic here? Because as the building's getting bigger, we're gonna have more pets or more dogs and animals. There's gonna be more bathing and cleaning, and how do we deal with septic on the site? Because we have a septic field, don't we?
Currently, the septic system is under the parking lot. That's
Okay.
in the front, and that's one of the reasons we could not expand. Well, there's multiple reasons why we didn't want to expand forward, but that's the biggest one.
So if the building gets bigger in the back, does the field have to do we have to?
That's a Westchester County Health Department issue. We'd have to, send the information to the county health department and get a letter of that no expansion is needed or
Yeah,
approval for expansion.
They'll probably ask us for a water use record. So in the past, that's what they've always done. I mean, okay. I mean, so certainly as for the parking, I mean, and because there was no planning board meeting in August or September, is it possible for us to go for the variance for the 3 spaces in the meantime, since we're not going to come back until October?
I don't know that there's enough information. I mean,
So enough information the information, if they're going to seek a parking variance, it would be the zoning board.
Correct.
They would need to
Right.
submit that information too, in order for the
Right.
zoning board to determine whether
so they can go
meet
for
the
that parking
statutory
variance now?
criteria.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Okay, that'd be-
And I think as far as secret goes, I think normally because of the size of this addition, and because it's a non-residential building, it would have been type 2, but because a variance is needed, that amps it up to an unlisted action. But the boards can do an uncoordinated review to kind of facilitate the process. And in that, each board undertakes their own secret review. So the zoning board will do its secret review on the project. This board will do its secret review, presumably both ending up with a neg deck.
So
That
still we,
eliminates the need to coordinate, to do the notice of intent for lead agency, wait 30 days, declare a lead
we
agency.
would have to coordinate.
It's either do that process or have you do an uncoordinated review where each board does its own secret review.
coordinated review. You'd have to make a declaration tonight, which would give 30 days, and you'd submit the same place by your October meeting.
But they couldn't seek a variance in the interim, because you need to have the secret completed before another agency makes a decision.
Okay, so then you'd be looking at an uncoordinated review.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think-
that's why I brought it up
But I
to try
suspect
to
what you were also
facilitate
hinting
the
at,
process.
Sabrina, is that if we get sufficient information, that subject to the code, that this board has the jurisdiction and the ability to waive some of the parking requirements?
I'd have to look at, there's provisions in certain districts where you do have the ability to reduce the parking requirements. I'm not sure if it's for this district. I'd want to check that, otherwise it would be the zoning board.
Okay.
And they can provide that same information to the zoning board, and the zoning board,
Right.
same staff will review it for the zoning board.
Again, it's because of trying to expedite the process, to try to get it before winter, that we would seek a zoning variance, again, for 3 spaces, I think.
Okay.
And we will obviously submit everything else back to you as per the memo, so.
Well, I think we could schedule for a public hearing in October. And do we issue a notice at this point, or we wait because?
You wouldn't issue a notice.
Okay.
You would say, I would tell you, because if a variance is needed, this would be an unlisted action. You can proceed in an uncoordinated review as advised by counsel, and request the applicant to submit information, address comments prior to the public hearing by the submission deadline, and then hold the public hearing.
Okay. So we meet again October 16th, September 24th is the cutoff date for that information. And if it turns out that we have the ability to lessen the requirement, if we get information from you that makes sense in terms of the parking requirement, maybe you don't have to go to the ZBA. But
Will we do a sidewalk over?
if you want to go see dogs, you can go over there. Sure.
I like
You can-
dogs.
You can go see them.
today?
Excuse me, so will we not start the process of the ZBA?
No.
So you can go.
Start the process
Yeah.
with the
Just in
ZBA.
case, I would do it.
Yeah, exactly. This way, again, to expedite it, this way we can do that while we're waiting for
Yep.
to come back here in October.
Right.
Great, okay.
Okay.
One other thing is that typically when we review things, we like to know where the buildings are located on adjacent properties. Okay, and I didn't see anything here that really gave me a clear picture of that. There's an overhead picture, the aerial, but
We can submit a tax map. Okay.
good, thank
Is
you.
the site to the south of you abandoned? That
I'm not aware of it. I've seen a car there occasionally, so I'm not sure if it's
There's
abandoned.
trees down the backyard on top of their garages, okay.
I think it's occupied though.
Do we want to schedule a site visit, or do you want to get there individually on your own? Then there's something coming.
I have no problem doing it individually since it's commercial property.
So we don't need permission then to walk around the back of the building, or we can just come on the property and...
Doing
Guys
it
know
normal
if
hours.
there's- Get there all the time. Okay. We'll do it
Gotcha.
informal.
I don't want any dog chasing me at midnight.
Thank you.
Very
See you in
good.
October.
Yep, we'll see you then. Thank you. Okay, we move now to our next application, which is the Monaco Realty LLC. This is an application for a site development plan amendment, tree removal permit, stormwater pollution prevention plan approval, 13 Station Place. Jennifer, while Chuck is doing that, have we seen anything or heard anything from your firm with regard to the generic environmental impact statement? We were supposed to get information from your firm through the planning board to start working on town issues, hamlet issues in Chappaqua.
The generic environmental impact statement?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm not remembering what this is.
I don't
in
think you were at the
reference
meeting,
to.
actually. It was, yeah.
There was a memo that was produced.
Well, the firm produced, but I thought the conclusion of that joint meeting was that we were going to start to get some of the parameters for the planning board to start working. Okay, so that's the answer. We haven't seen anything. Okay. Okay. And has there been any kind of reaction to the, it's just last week, the memo that we issued with regard to the rock chipping and crushing operations from the town board?
Not that I'm aware of. They haven't, I don't know that they've met to discuss everything. I mean, their meetings are few and far between in the summertime.
Okay.
I know they're meeting on the 10th in the morning, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good enough.
I think it's the countertop. The hot air blasting.
Good to be here.
Chuck, you gotta stand back by the mic, please.
I'm going. Done this ever. Chuck Napoli for Mr. Monaco, and along with me, Michael Campbell, the engineer for the project. And what I'm going to start off with, they got one, believe it or not.
Of controls.
No. So here's an existing conditions survey of the property. This is 13 Station Place. It's down the road from the Drug Mart and the Chico and all of that. But there's Station Place down here, and these are the two, by the way, there's the condominiums or the luxury condominiums are next door, right there. Mike Monaco's property on the corner is right here where he has his garden center. And he owns these two buildings in between. And what he did 40 years ago was came to me and said, Chuck, could you design something that I could build? And that was his first garden center, one property down from the luxury. And he came to me again this year and said, could you build something for me that he could handle? And we decided to take the two existing buildings and connect them in the middle with a connection that services the utilities and so forth. I'll show that to you in a minute. But I just wanted to let you know that this property has a tree there. Let me see about the tree. Here's a tree here, and there's a tree right here. All of the trees, by the way, these two were planted by Mr. Monaco 20 years ago when he donated and planted all the trees along the sidewalk on both sides. But these trees are on his property. There's the property line. The sidewalk goes to the property line. The trees are on his property. We are removing that tree because we need a driveway. We are removing that tree. It's a mulberry tree. It's a giant mulberry tree with one big limb going off and the other one is busted and it's falling apart. I think Steve looked at that. And this one, I think, is a Charlie Brown tree. There's not much left to it. I would say it's a couple of stalks and some bare branches. I don't know if Steve will back me up on that one. That is going also. We're going to replace them all. What we don't have right now is a landscape plan, but we will bring a landscape plan. Mr. Monaco is working on it. He is going to landscape his own property with his products. And I'm going to go to the next slide and let Michael talk about the engineering and the drainage, the contours and the stormwater. But that's an existing condition. That building is a garage that's going to be removed, and that building is the shed that's going to be removed. And my work is in between the two buildings.
How is it zoned right now?
Business retail.
Sorry?
Business retail, BR zone. And I'm going to change this slide. Figure out how to do that. Yes, we'll go with this. And we're going to go with the doing this one out. Michael, is that good enough for you, or? That good?
Okay,
Mike, would you stand back with Mike?
yes, indeed. Mike in the mic. You know where you are, so I don't have to go back to that. It's about a half acre in size. And what we're doing is we're looking to fill in between the two and actually open up the existing buildings and use a lower area for a restaurant on one side, retail on the other side, and on top, more office space. We are not looking to expand into residential only because the owner of the property doesn't want to deal with residential at all. He's got enough of that, and yes, he's tired of collecting or having a hard time collecting. We have 31 spaces shown, 31 spaces that are necessary. We're not asking for any kind of adjustments based on zoning, like they did next door with the under the building parking and whatnot. We're just looking for a straight shot. We're looking for a driveway coming off this side, and we're going to fill in this area with more parking. The dumpster over here. We can do a planting plan. We're showing this area as not being, the parking not to be on either side of the entrance driveway. Reasons of getting the sight lines, which we don't have for you yet, but we can have all the sight lines. We can have everything that was asked for in the memos by the time the next meetings come around, because we have lots of time, unfortunately. And what else do you need to know?
Screening along.
Yeah, the screening, we'll have a landscape plan that is being, right now, is being prepared by Mr. Monaco, who is our landscaper to almost everybody in town. Everything else is pretty straightforward. We have created right underneath this pad that we have here, which gives you outdoor dining and stuff like that. That's the plan. For the restaurant, that would be on the lower part of this one, would have an outdoor dining area. And underneath that is where we have the infiltrators under the ground. The soil here is very sandy. In fact, we got a 1 minute rate back here. We're putting septic in the back, almost the same as we did next door with Station Place next door, the luxury condos. And well, what else has happened here that we have to show you? We can hook the overflow from this system that we're going to put in here into the existing. Right now, we don't have the inverts, but we can have those cleaned out because they're just all full of dirt right now. Well, I can have those cleaned out so we can shoot the inverts down the bottom of the catch basin so we know how deep our pipes can go. But we want to hook our overflow into that. We're still collecting all the water that we have to collect into the infiltrators to reduce flows coming off the property, because we are providing a large area of impervious here, so we have to get it into the ground. A lot of talk within the memos talked about impervious pavement. We're not going to need impervious pavement. We have a 50-foot offset from the septic area that leaves us very little room for impervious pavement. We'd rather not do that. It's just it's a maintenance problem. We can do it all here underground, and we're putting the water underground anyway. We don't need to put it in the pavement. We don't need them to make sure they maintain it properly, and we don't need to know that they're going to pave over it later on or anything like that. So, but we're doing the same thing. We're putting it in the ground and out of the way, and we have the space to do that. We have good soils. Everything is okay for doing that, and our system is 50 feet away from the septic area on purpose.
A question on the parking, I may have missed it, you guys may have touched on it before. Is the parking of the spots you have here 33?
33, yeah.
Is that the requirement for the retail and the business above?
Yeah.
So you guys is there any kind of shared parking
Well,
credit you
we
can
didn't
get?
do that, but
No?
No, they're not non-competing uses,
They're competing uses.
office, retail.
Well, if they're gonna do restaurants, which is a nighttime weekend use, couldn't we,
Breakfast, you can't say that.
fair enough. Okay, I'm just trying to reduce some of the asphalt.
I understand that, and
It just seems like a really large parking lot to have in a really small part of town. When the neighbors next door, I think, are a bigger piece of property and they have less parking, so.
Well, one of
It's the other way.
The other way to the corner.
this one is gonna be the restaurant, and this little pad out here is the outdoor dining, and below it is what Michael was talking about, is all the water is going into that. We've dug holes 11 feet deep for Westchester County to come and look at, and we're down into sand and incredible percolation. We have no real problem with water running off or flooding. It's just going to go right back into the earth. But the more, I guess the more critical question is that all of these calculations are left over from the old days when at Christmas time everybody's shopping and everybody's in the office and everybody's doing, and we know that all of the parking lots based on current calculations are over-designed anyway. And if there's any reduction in parking that should be looked at is why should I have so many spaces for that restaurant when half of it is kitchen and we have to calculate the gross area? I think calculating gross areas for a kitchen as the same as a dining room doesn't work. And we should be looking at different calculations. What, Greg?
I'd like to, because there's on-street parking here, can you
Yes, there
get
is
any
on-street
credit for
parking.
that, the fact that that's
No.
there? Because?
Because the code doesn't allow it.
We are
That's
changing
why,
codes
but that would
these
be a
days.
conversation we don't need to have right here. But it seems to me you ought to get some credit, especially on this road, because there's nothing else there, right, essentially.
Yeah, well, I would love very much, I know in Mount Kisco, there's a separate calculation for kitchen.
Usually you net out on a restaurant.
And what does that mean?
You typically you don't go by gross, you go by net on a restaurant.
Yeah. So I think if we started looking at net numbers, we could probably knock
But
off
sometimes the
3 or 4.
net is 10 per thousand, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, well, I do believe we should be looking at that rather than following a code that is older than me, and which is pretty old.
This all
That's
sounds
old.
lovely
Yeah,
in
that's
hearing,
old.
folks.
We have a code.
We have a code, we know that we need to revisit parking. If you'd like to make a suggestion to the town board to make this a priority, you may.
It's a good chance to look at something.
Not tonight.
Suggestions at that time.
Then-
Pending suggestions.
There's
So-
no reason why land bank won't work. I don't know if you can use it in this zoning district without any incentives or any other overlays being put on it.
Well, there's another thing, if we want to go back to the old code, we got a 30-car parking lot right through that door, right there, on the other side of the thing, and he owns that property. You could share parking, and that is a store, it's the nursery, or in that, it's a garden center.
Garden center.
And, I mean, you know, it's another commercial thing, but that whole back parking lot is never used. I mean, we already know that. The Talbot's parking lot, there's 30 car spaces back there, never used. And we should start looking at the calculations maybe instead of changing the whole code. But, and so I'd like to maybe next time come up with some possibilities, okay?
Well,
Let's
and
go.
check what goes on in a BRO code relative to land bank. You say, you don't
Well,
know.
here's the thing, folks, you know, as I said before, we all don't like to build parking, an excessive amount of parking. We want to be as efficient as possible. If there is a better way to do it, we want to know about it. You know, the comprehensive plan identified this is an area that we need to address. We're not asking to rewrite the whole code, we're asking to revise the parking calculations. We know that there are macro changes that have occurred in the way people drive, what they use to get from place to place. Millwood, you know, is an area that can be re-examined in relation to the amount of parking, but this board is not given that authority. You're not given that authority in the BR zoning district. There's no special overlay district being applied here, which would give you that authority to adjust parking. You know, but that's not to say that the town board would be interested in seeing somebody else's proposal on how to calculate and then incorporating that into the code. So I would encourage the applicant to provide information regarding calculations and what something like this would look like based on a net calculation for that restaurant versus not, based on shared parking with neighboring commercial uses. And maybe we could get that put into the code on an interim basis and cover the, you know, address things that this town needs to address.
You know, there are also, just parenthetically, recent experience in Millwood, there are unintended consequences because when Safeway was there was never a parking problem. Now that the Chico's is there, try and find a space on the weekend, it's crazy. I
On a
mean, it's
Friday
great
afternoon.
because it's, you know, there are a lot of people shopping now, and it's good for Millwood, but these things, depending on the tenancies, the category may be the same, but the tendencies, if they're different, they can make a bigger draw or lesser draw.
Not a problem with that. But that's not a problem with that. I just want to look at the building and take it apart
enough.
and look at pieces which is generating.
I don't want to discount your efforts, because I think it'd be a
And
good
you
thing to
do,
do.
and you do have the authority to land bank, but he needs to demonstrate that it's not needed.
Right, right.
You know, another option too that was also put in the county's review of the project is to really look at, you know, it's a tremendous amount of impervious surface that's being, you know, created, and we're not really treating any of the stormwater on site. We're infiltrating and sending it elsewhere. You know, so one strategy could be that, you know, like parking spaces 10 through 22 could be designated as porous pavement parking or grasscrete or some other method that could sort of serve as auxiliary parking, you know, when they're not using it on a regular basis, but it would have the benefit of reducing the impervious cover and provide some on-site treatment.
Green it up a little bit.
You know, and the other concern with a parking lot this big, which I put in my memo, is, you know, just the thermal effect of, you know, having that big area. So, you know, the landscaping plan should look at creating either some median strips or some more plantings to offset that. And also look at, you know, just creating, you know, more user-friendly. I mean, if they're doing outdoor seating, you know, that would be an opportunity to do landscaping to, you know, meld everything together. The other thing which the county did years ago, and Mike Monaco did plant the trees for the county, you know, is they did create a streetscape of pin oaks and Bradford pears along Station Road. You know, so the site plan didn't show where these trees are located, you know, but they are still part of that streetscape element. You know, so I think that has to be taken into consideration as well, you know, going forward, is to try to maintain some of that design element.
All well said. I agree with all that.
I'd like to
Did you have
talk a
other
little
points
bit
that you wanna
about
raise?
the,
One second. Steve, do you have other points you want to raise?
Yeah, one other aspect too is that, you know, if it does stay all asphalt, and there's a lot of petrochemical, you know, potential. I mean, if you have, I mean, doing some type of oil good separators or, you know, hydrodynamic separator would capture some of that, because if you got all sand underneath, you know, the infiltration rate is pretty high, so some of that, you know, effluent could not get treated at all and go right into the water supply. You know, so I think it should be looked at in terms of capturing some of the, you know, runoff that can occur with all the parked, you know, vehicles. And then-
All the runoff goes to one place.
yeah, of course, I do, yeah.
So that,
And then,
I could go
yeah,
back.
just, yeah, I mean, those are the primary things, was really a landscape plan, which I know they're working on, and, you know, looking at, you know, creating more of a, you know, a buffer to the whole property, the perimeter, and, you know, through the parking areas.
All the runoff is here.
okay, well, it would be easy to put a small oil separator in.
Right there.
Is it already there? Oh, I thought you said it was up
No,
here.
No, that's not there, but that would be a good place to do it. It's easy.
Yeah, okay.
And then if and when that ever fills up, it ends up going to the catch basin out here.
Yeah, but there's no treatment of runoff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And
just
the good news
a
is that
conveyance system.
cars leak less these days than they used to,
They do.
but still, they still do leak. And the other good news is, because it is a parking area that doesn't have housing, it'll be a place where people don't go and change their oil, because someone is gonna, the restaurant people will be there all the time. So that'll be a plus that we didn't have in some other facilities.
Except for all the grease that falls out of it.
Well, that's a whole nother thing that, you know, the restaurant is
There's
gonna
a
have to
grease
show how to
station
deal with
there for
that.
fueling. This property line
Maybe it
between.
should be a vegan operation.
Might be a vegan
Yeah, is your
knockoff.
grease going into your septic field?
No.
Where's your
No,
grease
no,
going?
with the grease trap. Oh,
Grease trap under the counter and they remove it?
Yeah.
Or- okay.
That's every restaurant kitchen that I've done, that's been grease trap. And I used to have to clean those things out, and they're no fun. This is the property line between residential, I think residential, it's a luxury resident. That needs to be the 10-foot buffer that Steve was talking about, right there. We need 10 feet of bushes there, right? Between residential.
As a minimum, yeah.
In your memo, you said on all property, but I don't think you need it here, and you don't need it between this commercial, you just need it that residential.
I would disagree. We don't know what the
Say again?
uses are.
Park up to the property line?
No, I think the point he's
On the right
making is
side.
that, oh, there, yeah,
You're allowed to go all the way to the property
yeah,
line?
because it's a business property on the other side.
But this is an aqueduct up here.
It's aqueduct. Yeah. There was also a letter from DEP in the aqueduct that says, hey, are you gonna put any heavy equipment, digging any giant holes, pile drivers?
Dynamite.
No, we're doing we're digging right here, and that's pretty far away. And we're putting a septic system in there, just goes down.
Mhm.
So there's no big, heavy equipment for them to worry about.
I want to talk about the inside, if that's all right.
And when you have, of course, when you bring back the other drawings, you'll show where on some sort of overlay, where the other buildings are, so everybody can, so like there's a building over there, and then there's the housing over here, so
Yeah.
you'll have a little inset box or something.
You want that? We'll get you.
We'd like to have that every time.
Here's the building.
That would be the drawing to do it.
Yeah, we could show an outline. I think one of our drawings did show that, and of course that. That's the luxury coming
And
And what
am
about,
I
on
mistaken?
the right?
Chuck, am I mistaken, is there parking,
Yep,
parking
that's
all
all
the way back
parking.
here, right?
Yeah,
as
it's
I
all
recall?
parking.
And this is what happened to Mike? This is parking here, and then
Yep.
this is where the plants are.
Yes, the Millwood Gardens.
And then the building's over here on the corner.
Yep.
Right down there. This is
That's all.
Parking here, back up, parking here, island, parking here, island, and then parking. There's just a lot of cars, and there's an in and an out right here. And along here, there's a car park there. We're asking for that to be taken away, so that when somebody's exiting here, they can look down the road.
Right.
Similarly here, and Mike shows that no parking there. We're asking for that so they can look down that road. Right now, it's really hard to get out of this driveway right now with cars parked on the street.
And they do.
They park and it's hard to get out.
Right.
Yeah. Let me go to this.
Yeah, only if you're making a left-hand turn. Right-hand turns are easy.
This is first floor, and this is first floor, and this is the new work. And what it is that there's a ramp and an entry, a rear entry, and there's a front entry. And what happens is that it's set up right now as two big spaces. Should we ever want to divide it, I have enough to divide. I have a bathroom over here for this back half. I have a little bathroom, half bath for this side, if they ever want to make two little stores or two little shops. Similarly, over here where the restaurant is, we have the handicap bathroom out here. And if it was ever two spaces, by the way, two more retail, if you ever want to do that, would be less cars than all of this restaurant. But if they ever wanted to split that, we have a bathroom here, and of course, the handicap is in, the bigger is off in the hallway for anybody to use.
So is this the proposed office space over here?
That's retail. This is restaurant.
So this is just the first floor elevation?
First floor elevation, and this is the outdoor patio with all of the planting and all that other stuff, outdoor garden
Chuck, are
area.
you renovating the inside of these buildings as well?
Yeah, we're gutting them. Right now, they're apartments. And we're gutting them,
You're gutting them?
yes.
And I'm gonna go to the last, next to the last, if you don't mind. This is second floor. Mouses, okay. Yeah. Bring my mouse next time, okay.
This is second floor. You end up at the top of these stairs, and if I wanted to, this is an office. I have 947 square feet on the second floor. This is the roof of the porch below that exists right now. I could put a wall here and have an office with a bathroom and a door, and I could have an office and a bathroom and a door. Similarly, on this side, I put a wall here. I have same facilities. I have a bathroom and a bathroom, entrance. That's what that looks like. However, if I ever wanted to turn this second floor office into apartments, I have a 900 square foot apartment. I have an existing bathroom. And what I do is I take this and I turn that into kitchen. So now I have bedroom, dining area, living room, with a kitchen and a bathroom. So it could be converted with no problem into an apartment, should we ever want to go back that way. But right now, Mike Monaco has had apartments for the last 30 years, and he's sick and tired. He has 2 apartments on top of the garden center. He has 2 houses across the street from the firehouse, all rentals. He's tired of renting he wants little offices. And he thinks that these are cute little offices for somebody to come and have maybe an architect, or maybe a counselor, or a tutor, or, there's room for those little spaces. That's what that is. But the point I'm making is that you could convert these from office to apartment real easy. Because all of the plumbing and all of the mechanical support, all the mechanical systems are in this connector.
But no matter what, we will have the infrastructure and the parking available no matter what.
No matter
Because if
what.
it goes to apartments, it's actually going to be a lesser
A
requirement.
lot less.
Right.
That parking lot is for the
I
max.
think that's our concern here.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna do one more, just to show you what the connection looks like. This is what, there's the existing buildings are right here. This is a front porch that's already there. We're just closing it in, making it a display window for the retail operation. This is an area where we'll put tables for the restaurant. This is the main door. This, in the material of stucco, these are clapboard buildings. This is the exact building that's there. Instead of the siding that's there, we're changing it to clapboard. I use the colors only because that's the color he likes. But this is a stucco connector, and it has the units for, the mechanical units is for, and the roof hatch and all of the necessary things. This is the modern connection to 2 big open spaces that are very flexible spaces. So that- Yeah, ramp in the back.
Okay. Sabrina, you had some thoughts on this?
I sent you an updated memo. As office use, it is considered a type 2 action, so you do not need to do CEQA. I had asked for more explanation as to why no second floor office use. I think that should be put into a narrative, Chuck, just because it is inconsistent with the comp plan update in the sense that it calls for apartments, not office use. Right, but I think having a write-up regarding that specific point is important for the file. There was some discussion about off-site wetlands and wetland buffers in your application material. If that's the case, we need to see the lines on the plans. So then maybe you should edit that.
Those computers really.
Yeah, you've explained tonight the area of that concrete pad that you're using it for infiltration and for a patio for the restaurant. There should be notes on the plan indicating that. Again, the landscaping, the trees to be removed, you talked about that. Site lighting is also something that you should
Didn't do it.
provide. And then if the planning board wants to do a site visit or something like that.
Chuck, can I ask you about that elevation again? Could you go back to that for a second? And I know the ARB, they haven't looked at this yet, have they?
No.
I know that they will. Still have their comments. But could you tell us about this, the architecture connector again? I mean, it looks like a connector.
It is.
Why the choice of that particular style?
Well, first of all, I need a flat roof to put all my equipment on. That always helps. It's out of the sight, out of view, and it doesn't bother anybody. But also, the 2 existing buildings are impacted minimally with a little 1-story flat roof or the 2-story flat roof connector.
So it's when you say impacted minimally, it's.
I'm not trying to make it look like one big building. I'm trying to look at like 2 buildings with a connector.
But you could make it look like 3 buildings.
I didn't want to, but it is, technically it is 3 buildings, but
I know, but-
these 2 exist. It's historic, they're there, and I'm doing as little as possible to connect to them. That's the minimal connector I can do.
Well, I hear you, and the ARB they'll look at it too, and they'll
Well,
decide
yeah,
whatever they decide.
what are you saying? Like another peaked roof in the middle or something?
Well, what I'm saying is that maybe we're solving for the wrong thing. If we're solving for these, and these aren't, I mean, they're not historic buildings, they're just old buildings.
That's it, old.
So I don't think that there's any to me, there's no real value to those buildings as architecture per se, that you need to keep them, have their own integrity. So I guess what I would suggest, or ask you is, if there's a version of, I understand the flat roof, but I don't think you need all of that flat roof to put that much equipment on there. And if you couldn't put a third gable in there.
This way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried, I didn't even try, actually. Didn't even think about it. I did think about putting a roof across a ridge line going this way, but it just made the thing look really big, and it minimized these little guys sticking up in the air, little.
Well, I didn't ask for that. Why did you decide not to go to the gable front?
Well, I don't need another gable front, I already got two.
Well, that's like saying you have like a string of row houses, and they all can't have gable fronts. I mean, of course they can, so.
Well, guess what? I mean, inside this one is a big open space, inside this one's a big open space, in here, it's totally different. It is a hallway with stairs and bathrooms. It's not even, doesn't even.
All right, so I'll just, from my perspective, this is unattractive. Actually, the architecture that has been done on the street, including yours at the corner, and the Station Road residential units, are actually, they're quite handsome. And I think they're all, let me finish, they're all quite well done. And I just don't see this as making a like-kind contribution to it.
I have something to build on that too. I have a thought that, whoops, no,
I'm gonna go this way, right? Whoops. Excuse me, I'm gonna get down to just the straight front elevation.
In the meantime, also, Michael, you've got Bob's memo,
Yes.
right, for all the engineering issues that he's raised?
No problem with that. They just
Okay.
have to be addressed.
Okay.
Another thought would be to perhaps extend this roof to this roof.
Yeah, been there too.
You don't like that?
No, that's why I
And
tried
change
this
the
separate.
windows up here, because this window is discordant with these. And
That's the whole idea. It's not another one of these. It's a whole separate thing by itself. It is the front door, and in the back it's similar. It is a whole different building.
Okay, and handicap access is
In the
where?
back, yeah.
In the back.
So if I'm a customer coming to this restaurant, where's my front door?
Well, where you park. And
If I'm coming
and
to this retailer, is my front door in the back?
no, right here.
Where it's on either end.
Or the back, or the back.
Or the back.
So I'm walking into here, I'm going through a vestibule with bathrooms, and I'm going to a retail store?
No,
Also
you're going into a hallway.
And then I'm going to a retail store?
And then on the right, going to the restaurant, there you're going to stairs to go up to the
I
offices.
tell you, I think you're setting both those retailers up to hurt. I mean, as a retail person, there's nothing sexy about those storefronts that I can imagine that's gonna make me wanna go in there and shop.
Well, it's gonna be filled with display.
Yeah, but if it's stepped back, you're renovating an old porch. I mean, it's not retail, it's a house that you're renovating.
I don't know. These are big display windows on all four sides, all three sides.
Well, Chuck, part of the reason I asked what you were doing to the inside, if you were gutting it or not, I mean, a lot of the issues that we see in the building department with older buildings being left and gutted and is the structures themselves are difficult to maneuver to meet today's fire and safety standards, particularly for cooking establishments. So it just, as you're thinking about the project and you're wanting to put a restaurant in, be mindful of those changes that may need to be made that you don't wanna touch inside.
Doing a brand-new building would be a lot better, but Mike says, no thanks, because we've designed a building on this site that's had 6 apartments upstairs, 3 stores downstairs. He just does not want to mess around with his buildings. He wants to do it, he doesn't want to spend the money.
There you go.
And
That's where I thought we
And
were
he's
going.
putting.
he would give me
floor
something he
product
could
out.
build, give me something simple that he could build.
Okay, that's fair. It also has to be something simple that he could build that the town thinks is good for the town. So
I don't
there's
know, I have no.
another voice in this.
We have a problem with, well, I'm gonna take it to the architectural review
Of
board.
course.
Sure.
Absolutely.
But I don't have a problem with that connector being not imposing on the existing two structures
Fine,
that
I
are there.
respect that. I just don't agree.
And I don't agree that the ones next door are beautiful. I think that was a mistake in the middle of the business district to put a bunch of apartments. And on the first floor apartments? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay.
Where did that meet in the
If
middle
you want
of
to
the
raise
design
that,
plan?
do you actually think that all of that square footage as retail on that street would actually have survived? I don't think so.
I don't know about retail.
So what else? Office? I don't think so. I mean, I think what we want is, I'm sorry to get in this debate, but you raised it.
Good
And
debate.
we can talk over coffee about this later and not bore all these people. But I think the objective there, as you know, was to get residential close to inside the Hamlet Center, which is an objective that we're working hard on now based on the comprehensive plan to do here. and
Hell,
to
I
do-
have no problem with that. In my next application, I'll be asking for that.
Very good.
We'll
Great.
see how you take that.
Okay, and we have the, you have the memo from the county, which Steve has alluded to, and also the county's, the DEP's memo, so you have
Yeah,
that.
we have that.
So we're working with this. So can we expect, if not a different application for the?
Now, you're not gonna see a change in the architecture right
So,
now.
if not saying that, but-
You will get landscaping, you'll get lighting and landscaping.
Well, we need more than that. We need responses to all these issues that have been raised by Sabrina, Bob, and Steve.
Parking.
Yep.
There's gonna be a parking request with some data.
Yeah, exactly.
And impact on what the site could look like, because I'll tell you.
Just for one last question.
Here's here's one with, the same thing, but not as many parking spaces, and look what happens. I leave the tree, I have a drive coming in, I have lots of green space, lots of
The other
eating.
plan have two curb cuts?
No. No, I missed, our friend right here told me I'm not gonna get a truck through a 10-foot driveway. So.
It's narrower than 10 feet.
It's a little more than 10 feet, but to me,
You won't get a truck through a 10-foot driveway.
No, it's not even 10 feet. It's less than 10 feet. You're going to
Too
have trouble
narrow.
getting your truck.
It's narrow.
It doesn't meet code, it
I
doesn't do
understand
anything.
It's,
And Bob raised some issues about the turning radii as well.
well, there wouldn't be a problem with, right here, there's no problem with turning radiuses, but again, you know, here's septic, we have lots of planting over there, a whole ton of planting over here and a whole bunch of planting over here. Could be really good.
Okay, I think consistent with our policy here of making all these things contingent, is there a proposal that we move this to public hearing, provided we have responses to these various memos?
I'm sorry, I'm with the architects over there. I don't see this working to the way you want it to be. I think that the door in the middle, I agree with Greg. It's a turnoff. I have to find where I'm going once I go in the building.
How
I don't
about,
think so.
yeah, well, it's one of those
But I
things
would-
where,
I would-
you're going into a vestibule. You know, the signs are on the door, just like over at, just like that one North Greeley Ave. You go into the front door and then you can pass into the various stores or go up to the elevator or up the stairs.
Well, I think that's really for the ARB. Now, if we wish, we can drop a memo. We don't always have to be good guys. We can drop a memo that says, we really don't like this plan, send that to the ARB. And that we don't think it contributes to the town, if that's what we feel.
I think he needs to demonstrate that he can address all the other site features. The architecture and the access is one of the many things you need to consider. He still needs to address all those other elements.
right, and I don't know how much leverage we have to actually influence if there are no consequences to site planning and the kinds of things that we are actually allowed to comment on, or at least pass resolutions on. I don't know how far we can go. I do sort of like the idea of alerting, and we don't have to alert them, but let them know how we feel about it if we have a joint feeling about it. But I myself have been before the ARB, and they can be very, very alert to certain things and be very strict and sometimes demanding about what they think is appropriate here. And I kind of trust them and their judgment from my experience. I mean, they wanted, I'm doing an addition on my house, they wanted to be sure that I had the right muntins in the window, right?
I understand, yeah,
That's
we've
how
been
they-
there.
Bounced me when I came in front of them 2 months ago.
You should have called me, I could have helped you.
Well, not with that drawing.
I've been here for, yeah, well, I don't know, I have some pretty good arguments about that particular, I might have, maybe the function, you know, I'll look at that, but,
So,
but I must admit, I tried with front doors everywhere, and I tried with steps up, because, you know, I got ramps, I gotta go ramps on everybody. It's interesting.
Well, but you have to solve these other issues.
No problem.
So so assuming that you can get material in that solves this, it's subject to a positive reaction from staff, we can contingently schedule this for a public hearing on October
Well, that would be-
16th.
That's very generous, thank you, yeah, thank you. We'll work very hard.
September 24. That make sense? So we, it's our new carrot policy.
I'm out of town, but he can do it.
That's a submission date, the 24th.
Submission.
I want to see the landscaping plan. It's a little bit too much to
No, no,
expect
no
that this is all
problem.
going to turn out right.
Well, that's why I think it's, you know, it's giving them the incentive, but if you think it's too much of an incentive and you want to wait, I'm fine with it. I'm just,
Would the applicant go to ARB between
No.
now and
No,
then?
no.
No, okay.
they've got to solve all these
They've gotta
site
solve
issues
all
that
this
we've
stuff
raised,
before-
that
okay.
from Bob and Sabrina's memo and Steve's memo, as well as the county and the DEP's.
If all ducks are lined up, we would have a public hearing on the 16th of October.
Right, subject to word back from staff by September 24 that they have in fact satisfied these. If we haven't, we
Keep
can't
that
go to
open as
public.
long as we want.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you want, I'll put another peek on the new, and you can take a look at it.
Jack?
Here.
What? One of these spellings of your client's name is correct.
Oh.
M-O-N or N-O-N-E-A?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is Campbell's writing.
I know, keep it. Chuck, there's 3. You might want to change them. I know some people who get offended. My grandmother always used to get offended.
Right under the bus, Mike, right under the
It's
bus.
stuck.
Okay, we're all set?
I circled them for you.
Do we need a resolution to schedule for a public on a contingent basis? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. What?
Should we? That's okay.
I know, do not have that.
What was it?
It was clear in the discussion.
Well, we'll see how the verbatim comes out.
You can check it.
There'll be 40 pages.
I didn't read the verbatim.
No. Okay, we move now to our next item, and this is an informal hearing for a new application. This is Westchester Pavers LLC, 60 Millwood Partners LLC, application for a site development plan amendment for change of use approval, 60 Millwood Road.
Hello.
Mike.
I guess I plug in worse than that?
Yeah, somewhere.
It's so much greener from there than it is.
Hello, my name is Michael Gallen. I'm representing the owner and the tenant that is, who's the applicant in this application, DeLamba Masonry and Westchester Pavers. It's sort of a joint company. They operate under 2 names. 60 Millwood, as I understand it, the board is pretty intimately familiar with the site and had a pretty significant review for all-star millwork. And so in many ways, you guys are probably more familiar than I am. I am an architect by trade out of Pleasantville. I don't think I've ever been in front of the board, but excited to be here tonight, the first time. I understand from the memos that we were required to submit a long form EAF. We had presumed it was a short form. I actually have that and was told I could give that to Janice. So take care of that paperwork off the front. So as I think you guys are aware, and ladies, this property has been vacant for about 3 years since the fire department has moved out, since they moved out. And ownership has been trying diligently over those 3 years to find the appropriate tenant to reoccupy the building. There are challenges in terms of parking, septic, and demand in terms of who would be appropriate for this site. They thought they had the right fit with All-Star, but in the end, they ended up moving to Yorktown. And as I understand it, that was driven primarily that they just ran out of time, that they had to find a home because they were getting kicked out of their current operations or they were going to go out of business. So Lamba Masonry and Western Paving is in many ways a similar use, but in some key ways a different use. They are an artisan operation, family business, doing high-end masonry, primarily residential. Is that correct? First of all, with me tonight, Ryan Lamba, along with some of the ownership team who you may have seen in the past. So if there's specific questions for them, they are available to answer them. You do primarily residential, correct? Yes. Yeah. High-end masonry, high-end paving in terms of Belgian block and those type of paving installations. The operation here will be their home in terms of their office. It will be the place that they keep some of their vehicles, and it will be their storage facility for materials and equipment. They will do, and this is a key difference from the previous application, they will do no fabrication on site. So in that regard, it's a relatively benign use. Hours of, just in terms of logistics, we submitted a cover letter that outlined the actual operations, but I will just highlight a few of them. Hours of operation are, hold that memo. Hours of operation are typically 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They have 17 employees, but 7 of them are typically working at job sites. So on a typical...
What days of the week would those hours be?
Those are Monday through Friday, are the typical days of the week. Sometimes they do work on Saturdays as well, correct? Yeah. But the typical operations are Monday through Friday with a lighter load on Saturdays when the demand warrants it. They have 10 employees, but 7 of them are typically operating off-site at jobs. The intention is that all of the typical materials will be delivered directly to job sites. So this is not a main distribution center. When they're building stone walls, brick, whatever, the stone typically gets delivered to the job sites. The waste is all handled at the job sites, dumpsters, everything else. But they do need a location to a home base for vehicles. They need a home base for things like scaffolding, potentially warehousing some bags of leftover grout, that type of stuff. The intention is to keep all of that material and equipment inside the building, and the site plan has some modifications to accommodate being able to keep all of that inside. The 3 employees will park in the back lot, and in addition, they have a few trucks, all of which fit within standard sized parking spaces that will be stored on site as well when they're not being used. So that's the main description of how they operate. I think I'll flip through the site plans. I'll show you the previous site plan just to remind you of what All-Star had proposed, and I'll show you the new site plan. We have purposefully kept the site plan very similar to the previous one in a hope that we can expedite the review process. Since I know there was a long review and a lot of consideration of that, there are a few distinct changes that I will highlight, and I'll get into that. More of a remote clicker for this. Yeah. Just,
The microphone comes out.
oh, that'll work. So just images of the front that we can refer back to if we need to, looking from the other direction. This is the previous site plan. Doesn't show up as well on your screen, but all the black areas are pervious areas. There were some land bank spaces back here that aren't really showing up for some reason. And there was a new septic system that has been approved by Department of Health and was proposed in this location. There was a dumpster here. Main loading zone for All-Star was back here. They had a site walk, one handicapped parking space in the front, another parking space here, and the balance of the parking was in the back. And our proposed site plan, very similar. There are a couple of changes. We are eliminating the dumpster area because they don't do any fabrication on site and they are not disposing of any of their material waste on site. They really only have office garbage that can be handled in a conventional garbage can. So there's no need for an outdoor dumpster or a dumpster enclosure. We still do show the same truck maneuvering that they had shown previously for a garbage truck getting in and picking the dumpster, just to give you a sense of scale. But the intention now is that this entire area here will just be used to provide access into the loading zone, the loading duct door on the back, which is remaining. And that's the same loading duct door that was proposed in the previous application, or to remain in the previous application. One distinct change, because Delamba/Westchester Paving wants to store everything inside. We think it's important for this presence of their home, not to stockpile anything outside, and we also don't think the planning board would find that appropriate. They do need a second way of getting things in and out. Typically, this will be how everything comes in and out. But if there is a case where they have a series of objects here and they have something in this back corner or in this front corner that they need to get out and they don't want to have to move 10 things into the parking lot just so they can get something in the back out, they do need a second way out on the front. So they've accepted that these two doors, which is sort of a tight area, will be closed off, the roll-up doors. But they need to maintain this roll-up door on the eastern side of the building.
Can you describe how those would be accessed and how and when, by trucks?
So,
and what the impacts would be to the approved site plan in that area?
Absolutely. So if I go back, this is the approved site plan. They had a row of bushes right up against the building here, and then a concrete sidewalk that came across here with an asphalt area adjacent to the handicap spot for the required loading and unloading at the handicap spot. What we have done, since this is now a loading dock door, is we've shifted that concrete sidewalk up against the building. We have created the landscape bed here between the sidewalk and the grass area in the front and eliminated it at this location. They will not be driving trucks into this door. So there's no need from an operational standpoint to pull a truck in and out of this door. They will be utilizing this door, like I said, if they're blocked on this end, to maybe get scaffolding out or to get a small excavator that they would have stored in here out so that they can then drive it around and onto the trucks here.
What about forklifts?
I don't think, you don't have a forklift. They don't have forklifts. Yeah, it's not that sort of heavy.
That is a handicap.
Yeah, this is a handicap spot. They currently, like I said, they have 3 employees that are going to work here. None of their laborers are in need of a handicap spot. Typically, this spot will be vacant. If it's not vacant, it will be under their control to a certain degree. Additionally, behind this spot, there is plenty of room for them to do what they need to do. This door currently is almost the full width of this bay, but the primary access will be on the eastern half of the door.
Can they change that door so it is just a half door? Do they need the entire width of that section of the building for the door?
Now we can go back to the photos and think about what that would be architecturally to try to break this in half and what the benefit is. Obviously, there would be a significant cost in that. How wide a door do you need to get things out? I mean, look, if the board thought it was a huge benefit, we could consider it. The critical thing is to have a release point on both sides of the building. Without that, it just doesn't work for them.
And what's gonna happen, these doors, oops, you have to kill myself here.
That wasn't me, was it? No, you're green, I'm red.
These doors stay?
Now, those doors get removed, and we are proposing replacing those with windows, which were similar to the previous application. So here's the front elevation, so you have the new windows here. Additionally, there's some windows on the second floor, and then this door remains. And just with the proportions of this, having a single door here, I think it makes sense. It's clean, simple.
Would you actually maintain the same door that's there now?
Yeah,
Would
we-
you replace it with
no, we-
something more attractive?
It's an expensive door. I think they'd like to keep it. What do you have in mind?
You see these nice wood ones that have some windows and some
Yeah.
crisscrossing on
I
them.
don't know if they are going to be able to spend $50,000 on a wood-clad garage door.
Go
But
from the left and slide that over.
are,
On the
are
rest.
those better?
It gets to a smaller door.
Go back to the photograph,
Okay.
see what we're dealing with.
You run into site issues, site distance issues coming around that corner.
No, I was saying take one of those doors and relocate.
We're still talking
Not
about
use
the
the
doors.
That would be an improvement, that's true.
You think so?
Those are nicer
I don't think
doors.
these are, they look nicer from this
Somewhat
distance.
tongue-in-cheek.
I don't think it's practical.
Well, here's, since we're on the subject, I look at the existing building, and I look at what's around it, especially on that side of the street. And to me, it looks like an industrial site, and actually, it's sort of a little industrial subsection of Millwood. And I don't find the existing door, which is the one you plan to retain, to be offensive at all. It seems to me it's just part of the architecture of the building and part of the architecture of that part of town. You know, if somebody's, go to the other view.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to agree with you, because it sounds like a good idea. No, I actually do.
remember, I had it first.
Okay. No, I sincerely think that is a
But
good
you
idea.
look at
Sure.
you look at the wires and the cables, and everything there. It's on the side of the building, and unless one's going to sort of completely renovate the whole property, it seems to me that it's just sort of an industrial remnant of.
And I think having some vestige of the history of it being a fire department makes sense. And we can't forget that there's a giant
I know.
electrical tower in the back of this thing. I mean,
Nice try. But
am I?
I think that. I
thought you left.
I think the new firehouse is better. But, I personally don't have any objection.
I don't either.
Yeah, I'm
It's
okay.
not worse than that, yeah.
I think those are the only pertinent changes.
Oh, you said there was an excavator. Is it a Bobcat? What kind of, is it a Bobcat? You have one or two or three?
We have 3.
And you're going to store them on site or in the building?
3
And on site or in the building?
in the building.
In the building as well?
And
Your
please
name.
introduce yourself for the record.
Brian Lumba,
Thank you.
I'm the owner.
That's it.
Do we need to have the ADA spot out front?
The what?
The handicap spot, does it have to be out front?
I think there were elevation challenges in the building as to where
That's
right, to
the
get in.
offices were
Okay, yeah, that's
located,
right.
so it had to be in front.
I wasn't sure if it was conflicting with a dumpster in the back, and
No.
that's why we didn't have it back. Okay, it was grade issues.
Yep.
So, get me up to speed on the parking area. Now, you have 3 employees, you have this large parking lot behind, you have 3 or 4 trucks, right? And the balance of that space back there?
The parking calculation is driven by your zoning code.
Here we go.
Here we go. And we are meeting that zoning code with the previously approved land bank spaces per All-Star. And we are trying to keep a linear process here, so that's what we were showing.
So is it based on office occupancy, is that it?
Combination of office and warehousing.
So this one's on us, you're telling me?
Yes.
Again.
You can give them permission to land bank more if you so choose.
That's where I'm headed.
I
Yes.
agree with that. Save some paving.
Yeah, I mean, Brian and I can talk about how many he actually needs. I mean, you want enough room to move around, but
Potential to grow.
Yeah.
Store the truck, store all 10 employees. I mean, there's got to be a day that all 10 guys are in the shop.
Meeting.
So let's. yeah.
Take a look at that, because I think it
So
would
if you
be.
then had 3 visitors, you might be up to 16 spaces.
I do want to reiterate that the existing lot encompasses all of this stuff. So we are reducing impervious surface. Already, and making it significantly better than it is now. In addition, this front here, I can go back to the photographs, but this is a sea of asphalt. And we have no, so I mean, I'd have to go back through the calculations, but this is to me, a dramatic improvement in terms of impervious surface, in terms of greening up the neighborhood. And so we're heading in the right direction. We can look at it. Can we move that over 2 spaces? Perhaps, but I just will reiterate, part of what we're showing is what we know you have put a lot of thought into, because we're feeling pressure in terms of time, so I'm trying to keep things linear. But
That's very fair.
Good. Sabrina, you have some thoughts and
Um,
issues?
I think the board has talked about most of mine. Yeah, everything, as they indicated, is pretty much the same as you originally approved for this site. The changes that they're proposing really focus on the front of that building. There's some operational characteristics that are different. You've asked them to assess whether or not they can land bank more than what they're already land banking. I think having a list of types of trucks and things that you own and that will be stored on site at the end of the day and on the weekends would be important to include in the information.
yeah, I believe it's in the cover letter, but we can add it to the drawings. There was a request that we added some other information to drawings, which we'll do as well.
Correct, and perhaps identifying where you plan on parking them when they're not in use. You know, they can be parked closer to the building or closer to the back, or,
Does the board have an opinion on that? Okay,
just for
so-
information purposes.
And then we'll show them where we think is best, but I don't want to show them one place and then end up in a long, protracted debate that we put them in the wrong spot. But
So you've heard about us, haven't you?
I've heard some rumors.
He was here earlier.
Always good to do your
So
scouting.
so you do need to declare lead agency, so we can distribute the
Yep.
notice and the attached TAF that was
Right,
provided.
and you
this
have the town engineer's memo, you've seen that?
I do, and most of that stuff we can respond to. There were some questions about sightline stuff that surprised me a little because we haven't really changed anything, but maybe I misunderstood the root of the
Well,
concerns.
I think it's important that you explain why you want that front door to remain and what type of access will be provided. The assumption is when you say you're leaving that doors, you're gonna be driving in and out of that portion of the site. And the site was reconfigured with sight lines and directionals, that was not going to be an access point
For vehicles.
for vehicles.
So was that the root of the asking?
I don't wanna put words in his mouth, but I assume so because you provided very little explanation as to how that door will operate or function.
And there's a sightline triangle that,
Yeah.
you know, is in the code that you have to look at.
Correct, which is shown on the drawings, and I presume was discussed in the previous review.
I would think that if your curb cuts if your curb cuts haven't changed, that the sight lines wouldn't change, right?
Correct, we have the same,
But the plantings change, so they may interfere.
there are 2 bushes here that are low species that we showed encroaching into this wedge. There was a comment from the engineer that he would like those 2 to be eliminated and to be shortened, which is fine. If the board thinks it's necessary, we have no problem doing that. It's a little less greenery,
In
but
this area here, maybe add them here.
we could do that. We could make it more of a wedge shape.
Well, and also, the question is too, you know, maybe rethinking this sidewalk and its extension up here. Do you know, whatever this elevation is here, because maybe you create an entire planting bed here.
There is an entrance
There's
right
a door
here.
there, they have
There's
to
a
go.
door there.
Correct,
Forgot
that we're
about the door
maintaining, so
there.
we got,
Never
we
Well,
gotta
it's
keep
not
that.
drawn right, so.
Not drawn right.
If it's
Yeah, it's
just
not.
a,
Yeah,
There's no-
because wasn't
There
there
should
an
be a
addition
little-
over here?
Yeah,
In
door,
the
a little,
photograph,
you know,
isn't there an ad?
swinging door.
Go to your photo.
What did I do wrong?
No, the door is there.
But in the photograph, isn't there something there? Oh, the photo.
I'm getting there, sorry.
Are you? There you go.
There's the door.
That's not an addition though,
It's not
that's
an addition,
in the
it's just a door.
volume. So we're just carrying the sidewalk to terminate
Yeah.
and have access to this door,
Right.
which is a necessity.
But I
Yes.
think further to Sabrina's comment was, in thought and what we think the engineer is concerned about, with leaving that door, The concern, I think, was, and we just need the information, will it be accessible by a truck? Will the trucks be backing
Right,
in and
yeah.
out? That's the sightline issue.
This and the turning radius
Right.
of coming from here or coming from the back and circling around in there, if that is the intent of using it. If you're just using it to remove scaffolding or to use your machinery outside to get it to the trucks to load, we need to understand the function of leaving this door in place. And you said not very often, you know, are we talking once a month,
Once a week.
you know,
They used to
that
pull-
type of just to
I
get a
think
sense.
realistically, it'll be, 3 or 4 times a week, but it's not like all the stuff's coming in and out there. It's just.
Right, well, and that's what we would need to define. We don't want it to become all the stuff is coming in and out of there now.
I guess, I mean, you guys, know how to look at this stuff, but, I mean, there used to be fire trucks coming in and out of that whole frontage, like, all the time. Now, I know they had sirens and so on to sort of
Safety
deal with
people
that.
and stuff too.
But if the curb cuts haven't changed from the original plan, why would the sightlines need to be looked at again?
I don't want to put words in the town engineer's mouth. He's really the best one to follow up on that question. But in my comments, I said we need more explanation regarding the function of access in and out of this building.
Oh,
and
that's
its
fair enough.
purpose.
And-
Separate from the sightlines question, I agree,
Well,
I agree.
and to the sightlines question, the plan before was to park a car, a handicapped car. And so it has a certain height. All right, so now if you have a truck that's gonna back in there partially and it's 3 feet taller than anyone driving around the corner, if that truck is in the sight line, then there's an issue. That, I think, is where we are. I think this all can be solved.
None of the parking is none of the paved area is in that sightline triangle, so it would be impossible.
We'll find out.
That's
Bob,
what
what
that
do you
is.
think?
I
We'll
believe
find
what
out.
he's trying to say is that if you have a truck sitting here, somebody here can knock it out because that truck might be blocking their sight line.
All kinds of
Right,
things can happen.
Right, if there's, and again, it's about the operational characteristics of leaving that door in place and how this applicant is going to use that door.
Yeah, and we have no problem putting
And we
that.
would need to note the specifics on the site plan and in the resolution so it is clear. And from an enforcement standpoint, if we see this door being left open and activity
Trucks going in for
mainly
loading
in
and
and out of there, we can't have that because of the sightline issues.
Understood, and we can put that on the drawing and be very explicit about it.
I mean,
It can
if
be
you're gonna
part of
take
the
Bobcats in and out, they'll move in and out in the course of 30 seconds, you'll get around the bend. So that's not gonna be an issue if you're moving them. But if you have a truck and then you're loading it for a half hour or an hour with scaffolding, then you gotta make sure you make the town engineer happy.
That's all gonna be done in the rear of the building, and we will put the notes on the site plan to be very
Good.
explicit about that, and then it becomes an enforcement issue. Beyond that, I'm not sure what I can do.
Yeah, well, and that's all we ask.
Steve, you had some comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things. It wasn't clear on the plan. We have that existing white pine that's in the back of the building that we determined in the previous application that really needs to be removed for the new septic. So it should just be shown coming out on the plan.
Well, there was an actual.
Where is that one?
tree-
Is that here?
That's right.
There was a tree removal permit for that, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a permit issued and that was part of the reason for doing some of the screening is to.
Has that permit expired?
Probably, because it's a new application, and we just need to do a new one with the new owner.
Okay, we'll work on that.
And the other suggestion is the front of the building, I think there's an opportunity to improve the curb appeal. I mean, you've got low, bushes in front here, but you may be able to do a couple more sizable trees in there to really soften the facade of that building.
You mean on the side or in the front?
In the front, because they're gonna take the concrete out, the pavement in that area, so there's an opportunity to look at maybe doing a more substantial planting with a couple larger trees.
I
It's
don't,
certainly improved.
I'm all for
Right
that.
here, on this side front.
Oh, that side front.
That
He's
side
talking-
front, not
you're talking
this
here.
front
Not
front,
the
but the
front front.
side front.
Gotcha.
He's talking about the front.
No, he's the front front.
You're talking about the front, there's a sight line issue there, Steve.
Outside of the triangle.
Where, right here?
I put some begonias, it'll look beautiful.
Right there, it's a couple bushes.
There goes your industrial field, Tom.
Here and here. Why not?
Bummer.
And I would suggest you wouldn't have to do as many spruces in the back if you put them in the front. Yeah, as well.
Rather have them in the front.
Spruces, aren't they gonna block the sightline? They're gonna grow tremendously big and block
Not
the
sure I'd
sightlines.
recommend spruces, but you can go with a smaller understory.
I don't think it's necessary.
I just want to point, this is not, if we're concerned about this movement in sightlines.
Right.
This is a parking lot back here. It's not a road. The road is here. Nobody's going 30 or 40 miles an hour through here. I just don't, we'll let Bob look at it.
Yeah, but Bob needs to
They
really
are
weigh
going
in on
30
his
to 40
comments, and
miles
you
through
can
that.
actually call Bob and discuss it with him.
I mean, I have no issue with the comments, it's just when he starts referring to meeting, doing calculations per AA, SHTO guidelines, yada, yada, that's sort of outside my expertise, and I don't really want to hire a traffic engineer if you guys have already reviewed this to an extent, so.
Well, then don't change anything from
Then-
where it was. I mean,
I don't think we have.
Yes, but providing the
Then you're gonna go and
information
make
that's
that
missing
case.
is essential to having him understand
Understood. Yeah.
what's going on, and to take away some of those
I think a
requirements.
phone call would be very useful.
Well, make a meeting, have a meeting. It's
We encourage meetings.
probably, you work close by.
Pleasantville's not too far.
We'd be happy to help you with the landscape recommendations too.
Yeah, great, I just don't want to open up a can of worms with the sight lines where suddenly everybody's like, okay, but the canopy is going to hang over the sight lines, which it will.
Bad
there's
idea to
no-
put a tree there.
I think, I kind of think we're making more of this than it
I do
will
too.
turn out to be.
Okay.
I agree.
Steve, you have other comments?
That's it.
Chuck does, though.
Chuck, you ready to add a gable here?
It's not a public hearing.
Come please,
Mr.
forward,
Monaco-
forward.
Mr. Monaco couldn't be here tonight, and he has 3 properties right across the street. So I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, it's an informal, and it's a change of use, yeah?
Well, let's, just for the record, it's, we have no obligation to hear from the public in such meetings, but as a
So keep it
courtesy,
very brief,
we
please, if you would.
often do,
Well,
as
I
long
just-
as you keep it brief.
I think what you're doing is fine. Mr. Monaco has some concerns that this is going to be an operation that might impact the residential units on the other side of the street. He's got the 2 apartments on top of the garden center, and he has the 2 separate buildings, which are residential little homes that he's collected over the years, and it doesn't seem like there's any impact. Matter of fact, it's less than fire trucks coming in and out, for sure.
It
It's
seems
also
like it's less than the,
Less than the prior application too. That was approved.
which was a woodworking operation.
Yeah, so he just has some concerns, and
Fair enough. We come to the public meeting, which
Yes.
will be when now?
Are you gonna set it for the 16th of October?
We have space?
Pending
I think we're-
resubmission of information by the 24th?
You do that with the NOI?
Public
It'll be
hearing.
30 days if you just
Yeah, we
declare
have to
your
do that,
intent to
right?
do the
Notice,
agency
right?
tonight.
I'll let him know about that. But we are changing the use, but it's a use that's permitted in the VR, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's no real major thing here. Thanks.
So far.
Okay. We do have a notice that Superintendent has drafted. Is there a motion to adopt the notice that we can get that circulated? Notice of intent to be lead agents on this application?
So, so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And is there a motion to schedule this for a public hearing on October 16 with a cutoff date of September 24 for information?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you then.
Thank you.
Okay, we have some minutes to go through. Now, I don't know how everyone else reacted, but I certainly did not react favorably to the verbatim on the November 8th, 2017 minutes. I guess it was an experiment, but really, I don't think it worked very well. I thought it was unreadable. It's just a recording. So we talked about this before. I talked to Janice, I talked to Sabrina. I personally don't think we should adopt those minutes. I think we should let Sabrina rework those, excuse me, Janice rework those and have them in the format that we consider to be minutes rather than just a stream of consciousness stuff that we saw. Is that okay with everyone? Does anyone disagree? Does anyone prefer that to what we have for minutes normally from Janice?
I think Janice's minutes are great. They synopsize
Right.
things, they make them more cogent.
Yep.
And I think that, I know it's extra work, but it took a fair amount of time to read through all 26 pages, and I'd hate to have to do that you know, instead of 12 pages or 8 pages.
Well, it was also.
Since we're not allowed to make changes, why'd you read them? That's my
Yeah, why, well, they're typos.
All right, so we will redraft those.
Yeah. Anyway, we have, next though, we do have the February 20, 2018 minutes, which I think are in adoptable format.
Janice, there's a few typos.
Is that the verbatim or is this
The verbatim.
Oh, well.
Yeah, just so you know.
I don't have any changes to February 20th.
Does anyone else have any changes on February 20?
I'm just checking, I don't believe so. They were done so well.
A masterpiece.
Yes. If not, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of February 20, 2018?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have the minutes of March 6. Any changes, suggestions on March 6?
I had no changes.
Ditto.
Okay, I don't think I had any. Therefore, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of March 6?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And finally, we have the minutes of May 29, 2018. Any changes, suggestions on these minutes?
I have none.
I'll abstain. I read them, but I
Okay.
wasn't here.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the minutes as drawn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, is there a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.